everyone, and welcome into the SMITE Challenger Circuit in A edition this time around. Feels like 2 days in a row we've been highlighting those European boys. Finally, get to bring it back to the hometown. But Gormizer here, alongside me is Aggro, and today we get to watch Gone to Tahiti going up against Elevate. I think I'm excited to watch it. I think everybody should be. Gone to Tahiti kind of making a splash as they came into it. You know, obviously when we get to see people like Baskin and the boys, they just kind of run over whoever they are opposing. But Gone to Tahiti are one of those teams that proved themselves during the playoffs and now have gotten this opportunity to come in and prove themselves here in the Challenger Circuit after making it out of the Open Circuit.
Yeah, and this is one that if Gone to Tahiti want to try and contest with the top end of the NASCC, Baskin and the boys, hype unit, I still consider Locked and Goated among that top half, then this is a must-win for them because Elevate is a team that has been struggling as of late, just has not been able to find their footing in the North American SCC, so this is a must-win, it feels like, for Gone to Tahiti.
And it's one of those weird things, you know, I'm looking at the rosters here, and Heed, Spreen, Blugan, Shia, like a lot of the people on Elevate have found a decent amount of success every time we've gotten to see them, especially play competitively. But you're going up against five guys and Gone to Tahiti that have been around this scene doing this exact, you know, level of play for years and years. You've got Mando, Mollusk, Sops, Diesel, and Cope. It's just a bunch of guys that at this point, I think, you know, historied is going to be exactly how I describe them. Even though it's maybe not at the same level as when you're looking up towards the top teams in the SPL, they've been hanging around the Challenger Circuit scene for a long time.
Veterans on both sides is definitely the way to put it. Veterans of the SCC. So these guys know what competition is like. It's not like we've got some rookies joining us here for this one, but they've also been at this level for a long period of time. A couple of these players, Mollusk, Mando Warrior, you know, they've had their shots at moving up. Mando has been staying near the top of the SCC for a while. Mollusk making his way into the SPL once upon a time. So these guys definitely still are looking to get back to that level, I'd imagine. And again, like I said, I feel like their performance today is going to be pretty important overall, at least in this phase of the standings, because these phases don't last forever, Gore. These NASCC phases and EU SCC phases, they kind of go by pretty quickly, so cannot afford to throw games like this away.
Yeah, we're in, week 4 of the SPL Phase 2, but this is now week 3, I believe, of the SCC Phase 3, so we're going through them pretty quickly overall, and they'll have a couple more shots throughout the year to try and make it not only through those playoffs, but just to stay at the top of the bracket. With the bans right now, Persephone, Nemesis, Cthulhu, Umoja, those 4 don't surprise me. Hercules, maybe a little on the edge. I think it just depends on who's playing them, but there's a Kepri ban coming out from Gone to Tahiti. Leaves Freya open, leaves this Ola open that gets picked in. It's maybe just a little curious as to where they're going with it.
I agree. I mean, a lot of support focus here by Gone to Tahiti, which is not something I was really expecting coming in, but really looking to keep Shia out of their comfort zone. Vamana Freya, pretty good, I would say, here for Gone to Tahiti. Vamana definitely not a top 2 worthy god most of the time, but really rises in value very, very quickly up against Ola because he is one of the best answers to that sanctified field. He just goes big baby and doesn't really care about it a whole lot, and no way for Ola to ever get away from that character. So a little bit early in the draft here for Gone to Tahiti for it, but I don't mind it at all.
When you're known for sticking to carries in the backline as a warrior, and you've got this nice giant CC immune ult that's just, it lasts forever in comparison to Sanctified Fields, you're pretty happy with that. But they're going to have Neith and Sobek on the other side. Honestly, if you cover up the Ola and replace them with somebody else, it just gives me some 2012 feels for what they're bringing into it. But Neith, especially right now, and I think Sobek, depending on whether he's in the duo lane for setup or in the solo lane where we've seen him more recently, I feel like every single one of those has really good potential behind it. It's just making it come to fruition and working together that Elevate are going to have to work on.
I agree. I think they've got a pretty good core here of strong CC, some good early game presence courtesy of the Neith, and then, of course, that fantastic late game of Oleron and his team fighting potential that he's going to bring basically no matter what. Interesting Ares ban here by Elevate. I wonder if that's a definite shot at Cope because he's played a decent amount of Ares in support. haven't watched all their sets, but I do recall some Ares play coming from Cope. And you see a couple non-CC immune ultimates in the back line here. I think that's a pretty smart ban already by Elevate.
Pretty easy to try and lock everybody down. So yeah, a good call from them. Plus, if I'm Freya and I already have an AoE, like most of the time you see the Pulse Irradiate combo, but hey guys, Pulse hits really hard, and if you're all three grouped up, I can't imagine wanting to just single target damage throughout all of that, especially with an Uller beside you. I don't know, gone to Tahiti, I'm looking at 4, like you said, Vamana maybe isn't a top 2 pick all the time, but because of what he's against, he goes up. But with Freya, Uller, with the Hunbats now locked in, I'm having trouble arguing against their draft. It just seems so strong when it comes to late game team fights.
They've got a lot of tools, no doubt about that. And now it's kind of up to Elevate to seeing if they can try and match some of those team fight prowess gods. Amaterasu's a pretty good start in that category, Gore. I mean, Raven not necessarily known as the best team fighter, but doesn't really lack in that area, I would say. Ama is the premier team fighting solo laner, so I think that Elevate have come away with a pretty strong draft of their own.
And it's weird to see the numbers, though. I mean, well, first off, Ganesh pops up with a 100% win rate. I wasn't even expecting to see something like that. But it was the Amaterasu. I mean, 24% pick rate, 24% ban rate, and then 25% win rate so far. So even though she's not picked too often, she's not been winning those games. So Elevate trying to hope and change that stat around. And I think what they have here is Sobek, Neath, Raven, or at least early game, it feels like they should be able to get some pressure very quick. That level 5 mark, we got to talk about it a little bit, I think, yesterday in the SPL, but you charge up that ult, that World Weaver, it sets up a good stun. There's a lot of potential for early ganks, especially for a Raven.
Easily, and that's what really needs to be bringing early on, is that she's pretty good in her 3v3 fight in mid. Like, she brings enough damage in CC that you're okay taking those skirmishes in the mid lane, but her greatest strength, without a doubt, is the fact that she can affect either side lane at a moment's notice with a guaranteed stun and some guaranteed damage coming in, and it makes your life as a jungler a whole lot easier. It's pretty easy to gank off of a World Weaver for sure.
Honestly, it kind of seems like a mid laner's dream, right? Like, Blugan doesn't even have to leave the lane. He can keep farming at any given time. It is going to make sure he's not missing out on a single bit of experience across the map. And he'll get some assists on the side if he does get a good kill or good setup there for his team. So there's a lot of potential, I think, for Blugan there in the mid lane. But again, going up against an Uller, it's going to be difficult. I feel like, yes, the clear maybe goes in favor of Neath, but as time goes on, the setup potential there between, Fear No Evil and an Axe Stun from Sops, I feel like Gone to Tahiti have a lot of pressure they can put onto this Neath.
Agreed. I think that without any sort of form of innate CC immunity in the kit, between an Uller and a Hunbats and a Ganesh, that's a lot of CC you have to worry about in that moment. So I think that is, you're right to be concerned for Blugan's safety in the mid lane, but I think that with the changes to Neath and how much faster that backflip is, it is possible that he'll be able to stay safe enough in that 1v1 in mid, and maybe even if Spreen shows up in order to survive the laning phase.
I didn't know relics could sweat, but you started listing CC, and I saw the beads there for Blugan start to drip, just consciously knowing, oh god, there's so much that I have to be used for here. But as of right now, it's maybe the pressure over here. We were highlighting it, and Monster Bomber is going to be on this Sobek. I'm actually kind of excited to see it. I don't know that Oleron has the best follow-up potential in terms of damage. I still think it's going to be solid, but he's not the number one that I'm thinking of in my mind behind a Sobek. But that pluck is still super deadly and can cause a lot of trouble.
It's just enough damage by itself. Like, Sobek just is this beast when it comes to dealing out damage in the support role, because he's got 3 damaging abilities on his normals, and then of course he's got the big damage out of lurking in the waters that can really, really solo a carry pretty easily come mid to late game. So even without a whole lot of extra damage from Oleron, I think he's going to be just fine being aggressive in this lane. Sobek just brings a lot of pressure by simply existing.
Well, speaking of pressure, that has been all that Elevate want right now. They went in 4-man split on the red buff. They weren't necessarily going for the experience gain as much as it was they wanted to get that rid of Gone to Tahiti. So they went ahead and picked it up. I'm always loving this because when you're a support player and there's an extra buff that gets dropped, sometimes you're the one who gets to take it, and that's exactly where Monster Bomber finds himself. And I liked what Mollis did because he read that there were 4 people going up there. He went for the other red buff, the opposing red buff there for Elevate. Unfortunately, he was only able to strip away a couple of those minions, so they managed to get not only both of their buffs, take some of that experience away, and I think ultimately slow Sops down a little bit, which is great for Blugan, who already has an early game advantage.
It was a bit risky if it was going to be just Blugan and Spreen going for the enemy red, but because Monster Bomber and Renjaru were able to get a lot of pressure, they rotate out. But I do think that comes at a cost for Elevate's duo lane. They don't get a guaranteed invade on the enemy Alpha Harpy. They don't get their own Alpha Harpy on their side of the map. It slows down their farm a little bit, but they really do pay attention to what Mollusk is likely to do in response to Elevate's aggression, and defending your own red buff in that moment is really, really good. I wonder if Gone to Tahiti could have held their wave and really just completely zoned Elevate from that duo lane wave, because they kind of pushed it, and Elevate was able to grab it as it was entering their tower. Maybe you let Diesel hold and rotate Cope out. I think there are some options that you can play with if you're the duo lane of Gone to Tahiti in that moment, because you don't want to just go in to fight in the jungle. That's not what your composition is good at this point in the game. So it's right for them to not necessarily follow, but either they hard shove and try and get the Alpha Harpies, or they hold the wave. Feel like they might have been able to get a bigger experience advantage for how long Elevate was gone.
And usually we get to see it, kind of be a recurring theme. When one buff goes down, you now have the timer, so it becomes consistency and how often you can get back there. Seems like one and done so far for Elevate. Gone to Tahiti, immediately scoop it up the minute it comes off cooldown, and now they're in an interesting position. But there's that World Weaver that we were talking about earlier. Forces the beads out from Sops. There's the Fear No Evil just to peel away a lot used from Gone to Tahiti just to stop the aggression from Elevate there. And so no first blood, but a lot of ults that are just off the table now.
And that's a perfect use of that Neath ult. You get aggressive wards in the enemy jungle. Love Spreen just blinking over the wall right away, knowing that he doesn't need that much extra help if we got that damage coming in from Blugan. It's just the beads were there in time for Sops to dodge some of that damage, got himself away from the Mystic Rush in time. But I love that style of play here from Gone to Tahiti.
Well, pluck into the Sanctified Fields in the duo lane. This kind of shows Cope Baby his place right now on this Ganesh more than anything. Doesn't get him close to death. Doesn't necessarily find as much as I think Elevate wanted out of that. And so again, a lot of ult usage. Not a lot coming out of it here, although they do still have a little bit of a gold lead. Maybe they get that pressure they want, but Cope doesn't seem to be affected by it at all. Has to get zoned out here so that he doesn't walk in and steal that purple buff. And now Dharmic Pillars are available, as well as Diesel being able to go into that Valkyrie's discretion, so they might be able to turn it around there in the duo lane just thanks to their ultimate usage.
I agree. I think that using the Neath ult and getting beads, a big win for Gone to Tahiti. Using Olaran ult and getting the Ganesh beads, which were picked up here by Cope, doesn't feel like as impactful of a win. Now maybe that's an easier to exploit window because it's still a very long cooldown right now, but I feel like Blugan's ultimate, World Weaver, just being on that inherently shorter cooldown in comparison to that Sanctified Field, and also being safer without his ultimate in comparison to Olaran, makes that a little bit less of an investment. Sanctified Field's one of those ultimates that just getting beads often doesn't feel like enough whenever I'm playing Olaran at the very least. I feel like you need to capitalize and get a kill or an objective off of pretty much every single time you press 4, especially in the early game, because that's the only threat you really bring at that point.
Yeah, and right now maybe makes him a little bit easier to gank, although it's not going to be him who's in distress right now. It's Diesel instead, the lockdown, the root, the World Weaver, everything Spreen needs to make sure that kill goes their way. And if there's one thing you want to do with Freya, it's slow her down. You got to stop her, especially right now. She's just one tier behind Renjaru in terms of getting to that ring of Hecate. So now, try to slow her down, stop Diesel from hitting that, well, just late game potential that we know Freya has.
Interesting choice by Diesel to not use Valkyrie's discretion. I wonder if he went out of mana. He was just too low on mana after he used Whoop. I can't imagine he thought he would live after the fact. I mean, maybe he thought the Whoop would give him enough disengage space, but he definitely could have ulted as soon as he got rooted and been out of range of that Prana Onslaught. So it must have been the fact that he was out of mana in that moment. And so far, I think Elevate have just really played around this Neath very, very well. Blugan hasn't been under pressure from this Uller, which shows that he's giving that Uller the proper respect. And he's using these World Weavers pretty much every single time they're up, which is, in my mind, the optimal way to be playing Neath mid.
And I think it's funny, me and Finch, when we were watching it yesterday, kept talking about that. And we were like, watch for all of these ults. And in the set that we were watching in the SBL yesterday, it just didn't seem to come through that often. So seeing Elevate do it kind of exactly to the note you expect is a little refreshing. But there's the Dharmic Pillars here to try and stop some aggression. Monster Bomber locked down, and in his ult, it looks like a good disengage once again from Gone to Tahiti. They might want to go back in. Mollusk, Diesel, Cope, all in the area. They're just trying to defend a purple buff. Pluck going to be just off the mark from Monster Bomber as well. Maybe putting him in a bad position. Elevate want something. They can smell blood in the water, and they just need to know where to go. But Gone to Tahiti are not giving them an inch to work with.
I mean, Spreen is set up shop on this left-hand side. Diesel is basically unable to go anywhere at this point. Good pluck by Monster Bomber. Sets up Mystic Rush, sets up the root, and sets up another kill for Spreen onto Diesel. And I don't really know what Diesel's supposed to do in that spot. I guess hit the whoop so that you don't get plucked, but Elevate is really just setting up shop on this left-hand side. And it's not really Diesel responsibility to do anything a whole lot different from this position. Cope probably needs to come over and help him out, hold his hand a little bit. It means he loses some farm overall, but it's better than continually dying. Mando invaded backs on the right-hand side. That's as much as you can really ask for him with all the buffs being down. But Gone to Tahiti has to somehow find a way to group up elsewhere and really punish Elevate, because I don't think there's a whole lot you can do to save this Freya's life at this point.
Yeah, we've seen the difference that you can have if you do set up a Freya for success. As Sop's there. Takes a little bit of damage, but again, it's safety. It feels like so weird. Gone to Tahiti invests so much in keeping Sops or Mollusk or Cope alive. And then Diesel's just kind of tossed to the wayside. But then again, what I was going to say, and I think maybe credit to them, is that Freya just relies on those items, so she doesn't need the levels, and right now 2 levels down, doesn't seem to be hurt too bad, but it's going to be Mando up into the ult through the Sanctified Fields, not able to get to the back line or really accomplish anything, just staying full health and warding Elevate away from this Gold Fury. They'd started up for a second. They don't feel confident in their ability to seal it without having to get a couple of kills here on Gone to Tahiti. Fear No Evil's available for Mollusk, but he's going to be looking to retreat here. They expend 1 ult for 1. Elevate still want more in terms of pressure, but they just don't know where to get aggressive. Unless Monster Bomber can hit a good pluck, I don't expect them to be able to start anything up the way they want, but he's in a good position to maybe find a good dazzling offensive. Now Elevate are the ones on the retreat. And Gone to Tahiti looking to try and get aggressive. Mollusk blinks in and finds the Fear No Evil. Good lockdown onto Monster Bomber inside the Dharmic Pillars, but it's not enough for the kill. In fact, Sops instead in the backline, chased down by Spreen, killed off by Elevate. And they found their chance for the counter-engage. Now they're trying to lock Gone to Tahiti away, either in those towers or not. They can find the pluck, but Monster Bomber hits the pluck, gets the beads, gets locked down because of it. And Gone to Tahiti find themselves a return kill. Now trying to force it out. Mollusk, wrong place, wrong time, wrong jump. Spreen is going to be able to find 2 out of the 3, and now that Gold Fury is looking a little bit free.
Man, Spreen is having a great game so far. All 4 kills for Elevate onto this jungler. Elevate gets themselves the Gold Fury as well. And I'm a little bit surprised at how aggressive Elevate was willing to play in that moment, because they wasted the best ult that's on the map right now, and that Sanctified Field. It was another suboptimal one from Renjaru, but I think the confidence of Elevate was just enough to really put Gone to Tahiti on the back foot. Eventually, Gone to Tahiti kind of realized, like, wait, what are we scared of? We've got Fear No Evil. They do not have World Weaver. They do not have Sanctified Field. I agree with Gone to Tahiti's assessment that they were in a pretty decent spot to be the aggressors, but the Fear No Evil from Mollusk was good, but not fantastic. And Cope's follow-up, he was trying to make sure that Monster Bomber got locked down. You can place the Dharmic Pillars, you know exactly where the Sobek is going to be pushed by Fear No Evil. And then if they could have really locked down that Sobek before he got off that Lurking in the Waters, I think that would have been pretty clean for Gone to Tahiti. But a little bit of miscommunication between Cope and Mollusk leads to a sloppy engagement that doesn't go their way.
An Elevator coming in at a pretty comfortable position. I mean, you expect Bravin to be, important early on, but he's 4-0 right now. He seems more than happy to continue his onslaught and his aggression that so far has been working out for them. And the retaliation they've had, I mean, you lose, in that entire engagement, you only lose 1 person, and it's your Sobek. You're perfectly fine trading out your support here. And Elevate have not let up on this left-hand side of the map. Every chance they get, they're putting pressure down. Right now, it's onto the red buff again. There's a good whoop from Diesel, and they're looking to try and lock down Spreen, but there, he jumps over the wall, and he's perfectly fine. Cope, on the other hand, going to be chased down and taken down. Monster Bomber trades out his life once again, so support for support. It seems like Gone to Tahiti might be looking for a little bit more. Blugan, half health, half mana, and Mollusk is in a 1v2. Diesel will be joining him in a second. That teleport might be key for him, but they just don't have enough. The whoop once again off the mark, and it doesn't seem like the lockdown from Gone to Tahiti is enough to find anybody on Elevate.
He's still chasing off some red jerseys on this left-hand side, trying to make sure that Elevate are able to snag their own red buff. Another just kind of awkward fight, though, it feels like, for Elevate. I mean, the team fight recap, I think, told a pretty good story there, Goremizer. Gone to Tahiti end up with way more player damage, and that time it wasn't because of a bad Sanctified field. I thought Renjaro had his best one yet in that fight.
It's just interesting to see them be this aggressive but seem disconnected when they're doing it, right? You're going in, you can tell they're cohesively saying we need to invade, but then it seems like something goes wrong when they actually get into that section of the map for themselves, whether it's, you know, hey, I finally hit a really great Sanctified Fields, but they're retaliating too well. There's something that needs to click here for Elevate. And maybe they just want to, you know, all-out brawl. It seems to be working for him. Diesel's one hit away, and Spreen's going to be able to find that one no problem. Mollusk is going to get taken down to half health and just trying to defend a purple buff here alongside Cope. But this is the kind of aggression that, you know, even if there are some mistakes, it's paying off for him.
It really is. I mean, Elevate now up a good 2,000 gold, basically, in this game, and Diesel has really been neutralized for the most part. I mean, Spreen has done a great job of being over on this left-hand side really, really consistently. But eventually, Diesel's going to do Freya stuff. You can't stop it forever. He will get items online, and he will get experience passively, and you will end up dying to this Freya eventually. And Elevate, I think, do need to clean up the way that they are actually 5-on-5 team fighting, because their laning phases have all gone individually very well, but the team fighting phase has not gone as well as it could have for this squad. Now, I mean, Renjaro's hitting his power spike. He's going to be the main one to watch in these team fights. Heat is only getting stronger from here. It's not like Elevate is losing the game rapidly, but I just know that they don't have forever on this Freya.
Well, they need something right now. Spreen, I was actually going to talk about diversification of your kills, and he's 5-1-0 now with that kill coming out for him. He's probably the biggest target to take down because of everything that Elevate have accomplished. He's pretty much been the one driving factor for it. Yeah, it comes on the back of maybe a World Weaver from Blugan or some setup from Monster Bomber, but almost every time he's the one who's able to chase him down. So I think a good kill picked up there for Gone to Tahiti. And like you said, Freya, in my eyes, is one of the easiest mage carries to compare to Hunters because of the fact that it's just like, it doesn't matter if you shut her down as long as you have. He's finished that Ring of Hecate. He's going to be grabbing a secondary ring, whichever one he decides to go for here. But even with a level deficit, the scaling's good enough, he's going to hurt you. So Diesel isn't really sad that he's 1-3 right now.
Well, he might be sad, but he knows that he's still gonna be doing it later on. He's got happiness on the way. You know, you can see that the sky's clearing up in the distance right now if you're Diesel, even if it might be cloudy overhead at this exact moment. I just feel like Elevate, their 5-on-5 team fight has potential, but has been a little bit too scattered. Not to say that Gone to Tahiti hasn't been scattered in these team fights as well. It's just that I think Gone to Tahiti's team fight is a little bit easier to execute. It's a little bit more individual-based than squad-based as Elevate is.
It almost feels easier to accidental your way into a good team fight for Gone to Tahiti here. And when you have something like Fear No Evil, it's pretty easy as long as you hit 2 or 3 people to just change the tide of the fight. So keep your eyes on Mollusk there in the back as he potentially gets aggressive. Gold Fury, or Oni Fury, actually, this time, has spawned up. The last Gold Fury went the way of Elevate, and that's where part of their lead has come to, but that's dwindled aggro pretty heavily, down only about 500 gold, so Gone to Tahiti have been playing the map pretty well, and now if they can get an Oni Fury, that will turn everything in their favor. But it always comes down to confidence with these Furies, how much you feel like you can secure it before the other team walks in. And it seems like they're just laying in wait. In fact, Diesel, comfortable enough to back off. They're pretty sure Elevate's not going to get aggressive.
And I think that they're right to assume as much. I mean, no beads now for Blugan, still no beads for Spreen, World Weaver, and Dazzling Offensive down for Elevate. I feel like Elevate really have to give Gone to Tahiti a whole lot of respect on this Fury fight, at least until some of those ultimates come back up. And even then, I mean, Blugan's going to be the only carry without a relic, and that's not exactly the position you want to be in.
Felt like they were going to start it now. It's Mando who's in distress as they put some pressure onto him. Goes up into the big baby, and he's going to be able to get the healing. That ult's going to be down now to try and counter out that Sanctified Fields. Heed's in the backline with the Dazzling Offense. Doesn't find a stun, but it doesn't matter. Still finds a kill on the Diesel. Is able to help lock down the Freya. Really good Dharmic Pillars. Locks down 2. Fear No Evil comes in to find 3. The damage is good, but not good enough just yet. Gone to Tahiti have no kills, and instead they lose Mollis. They look to lose Cope. I mean, Sobs barely makes it out alive, and Mando might just not. 5 members of Elevate staring down the barrel at this Vamana. So Uller manages to make his way out, but they lose so much in the process.
Beautiful fight from Elevate. In that time, they get another very, very good Sanctified Field from Ranjaru. Heed's creating a ton of space for Spreen. The target swap by Heed was really, really perfect. He silences out Diesel right as he was about to get popped by Spreen, and that ends up paying off so that Diesel cannot get that Aegis off. His ultimate was on cooldown, but still had the Aegis available whenever he fell right where Spreen is standing right about now. That was just a really, really well-executed team fight. A good shell coming out from Monster Bomber on Blugan whenever Blugan got Fear No Evil when they didn't have any purification beads. An impressive fight for the Order side right there. I do wonder if they could have ignored the Oni Fury and backed and gone straight to fire, with Sops being the only one up with no beads for him and World Weaver coming up for Blugan. Feel like that could have been a Fire Giant call there for Elevate, but getting the Oni Fury, and now they should be using the pressure that this Oni Fury is putting on the map in order to try and get at least a Pyromancer here while Gone to Tahiti has to respect those waves.
And it is almost completely off topic, but the Scarlet Dangerfield skin here.
It's dope, right?
Which is probably one of my favorites overall. I think one of the first ones that gave her a gun. I'm sorry, I got enamored with it because we were riding along with them, and I completely lost track of where they go. They get the Pyromancer, though, and I think all in part to Blugan's damage. Those weaves are something to play around, and that World Weaver, even more something to play around here as it helps lock down Mando. Not going to find the kill just yet, but those Thorns are gone. The ult's not healing enough. He loses his tower, he loses his life. Now they're losing their pressure, but that's a good Fear No Evil to try and lock down Monster Bomber. And Diesel, up into the air, finds himself the kill, but there's the Sanctified Fields. The damage, not quite enough. They force the Aegis out of Diesel. He's one hit away, but they're not able to get to the backline. Sops instead turns this one in their favor, and they lose 2 on the offensive here for Elevate. They're still pressed up against the tower, though. Sops, Cope, the last 2 members left for Gone to Tahiti standing here. And they're going to be forced to disengage. Cope just a couple of hits away from dead. One more auto could have done it, but Ranjaru unable to close the gap. Heed trying to take up as much as he can, but now Ranjaru having to Aegis just to walk through the tier 2. It feels like it got disconnected there for a little bit by Elevate, and Sops now potentially looking for a position to get in here. Doesn't have anything to close the gap, neither does Diesel. So Gone to Tahiti, we're going to call it at that with a tier 2 defense.
Elevate a little bit greedy right there underneath the tier 2 tower. Eyes bigger than their stomachs, going for kills when it should have been just focusing on that tier 2. And they get punished pretty heavily for it there, Gore. I mean, Blugan has to beads, Ranjaru has to Aegis, Gone to Tahiti keep their tower still up. Big lead right now for Elevate. I think they're in a fantastic spot for sure, but can't allow yourself to lose some discipline like that and end up chasing kills instead of being objective-minded.
Well, now Fear No Evil used exclusively for Blugan, trying to get rid of the Neath before Neath can make that impact. Beads and Aegis down here for Blugan. So is his life as it gets burned down. Mollusk making sure to apply the pressure where he sees fit. Diesel looking to do Freya things, and Ranjaru has no choice but to be the recipient for it. Nothing to help him get out of there. No beads, no Aegis, and no Sanctified Fields, but Heed doesn't want to let it just pass for nothing. Diesel locked down. Spreen jumps over the wall to make sure he gets the kill, but Heed now finds himself in a bad spot. No disengage available for Elevate here, and they're forced to fight. The Silence trying to do its best. Sops is so low, and Monster Bomber is going to be able to seal the deal on that one. Heed still running around like it's nothing. Spreen makes it out of the fight, but Mollusk is back and looking for more. The problem is Elevate read it, and they don't want to be around for it. Heed maybe getting too aggressive, though, decides to go forward towards Mando and Mollusk. I mean, he's tanky, and he's got Spreen still in the neighborhood. He may be baiting. They're going for the World Weaver. They're still going to be able to lock it down. That's a kill for Blugan from base, and Heed's still alive right now, taking the long way around between Mando and Cope, and that's the ult, finally, for this Vamana to be able to chase someone down. But Spreen's low, Heed's low. He doesn't seem to be able to determine a target, and even though you get these Dharmic Pillars, it feels like a waste for Ganta Tahiti.
What a fight, dude. That was lengthy. Take a breath, Goremizer. That was a long one there between those two. That starts all the way with Blugan getting ulted bottom left here with that Fear No Evil. I mean, Mando had the right idea. You could see him trying to position himself to body block that World Weaver, but it's where the small baby comes back to bite him a little bit. Just not big enough to block that projectile. Mollusk takes one step to the left at the wrong time and gets slammed by a Heartseeker enhanced World Weaver coming from Blugan. But so far, man, it's really just been how impressive for me Heed has been on this Amaterasu. Now, I think he probably gets away with a little bit of murder pathing up after that engagement in mid, though of course it works out because of Blugan's ult. But I feel like this Amaterasu has been really, really difficult to handle here for Ganta Tahiti, and I've been impressed with the timing on Heed's silences as well. Not an easy setup to nail every time.
Yeah, that was really one of those plays that when you see it happen afterward, you can say it was all calculated and you knew it was going to work that way. But going into it, much like going into this, didn't seem like it was going to be able to find too much. Cope dropped the Dharmic Pillars. There's the Fear No Evil. Doesn't seem to find a whole lot there for Mollusk. Maybe a little bit of peel, but the damage is still following through in favor of Elevate. Mando looks to zone out a few on his own. Spreen, though, is in a 2v4 and more than happy to keep that kind of pace going for them. Heed is the lowest health bar here for Elevate, but has some self-sustain. And this is a good position, at least for a Pyromancer. They might be able to force out a Fire Giant or an awkward fight for Ganta Tahiti.
That was 4 ults in order to try and kill Cope, and Elevate did not succeed. Good relic usage by Cope. He ends up living and some good peel from the rest of the squad in order to help him in that regard as well.
Well, Diesel gets a good whoop, at least for a disengage, but he's low in the backline. Freya has lifesteal, but not enough to keep him in this engagement so far. As Elevate still want more aggro. I mean, the Fire Giant's still available. They can force something back there, but why go back there when you can Sanctified Fields up here next to the enemy tier 2 and lock down Mando? Cope gonna get stunned down. They really want to kill this elephant, but they're not able to. They force the Dharmic Pillars still, and that again, even though it seems like such a low cooldown since Cope has had it every time they need it, is going to be a big win for them, especially considering how great that is around objectives.
But that Sanctified Field was solid. You love to see the pluck synergy inside of Sanctified Field as well. Just makes it impossible for anybody to survive, including Mando Warrior, who's gone very, very offensive with his build. Mystical Mail is a hybrid item, but still does a decent amount of damage. Sledge, another hybrid item. And then Hastened Katana is purely outright offense. And even Shogun's is basically a hybrid item in this style of build because it's giving himself attack speed as well as that magical protection. It means that he's very threatening once he uses that Colossal Fury, but without it, he's really anything but. And right there, Elevate kind of ate him alive before he ever hit the ground off that pluck once that Olaron ult went out.
And I think that's really where a lot of this strength lies. I honestly thought Ganta Tahiti were going to have a much more deadly backline when it came to the late game, and I still think they do hit hard. It just seems like Elevate seem to recognize where the strength is coming from. They've been focusing Cope and Mando more than looking to lock down Sops or Diesel. Sometimes you see a stray auto or stray ability hit Sops and Diesel, and it's enough to force them out of the fight. But it's been almost a weird priority to me in favor of these tanks. But now, as I say that, it's a World Weaver on the Sops. Spreen jumping in on him as well. Should find the kill there, but Fear No Evil in return. It should be mid for jungle. No problem there for Ganta Tahiti. Maybe a little bit of some overzealousness in Elevate's play, but they get the Phoenix as well, aggro, and now, I mean, you're forced to run away, but they don't care. They drop themselves an Ankh to try and cut down the healing. Diesel forced to go into the air and try and stay alive. And that's a lot of defensive play from Elevate, or from Gone to Tahiti, I apologize, as they're just looking to defend their base.
A lot of trading up happening right now for Elevate. They're trading Dazzling Offensive for Valkyrie's Discretion. I'd favor the Valkyrie's Discretion if I could choose one to have, and Elevate is consistently forcing Diesel out of that option. They trade Spreen for Sops, and even though the Raven is 7-3, I think if you can force Gone to Tahiti to have one less damage dealer, especially with how neutralized Diesel has truly been, I think that's probably just fine for Elevate. And they get the mid-Phoenix because Gone to Tahiti overextends and over-rotates in order to make sure that Spreen ends up trading one for one. I just think that Elevate has really played very well around their Neath ultimate in particular. I've really been impressed with Bluegit and how the rest of Elevate has played around that World Weaver pretty consistently. That was another kill to set up because of a Neath ult off of some vision that they had.
And even here in the late game, I mean, you think about it a lot at level 5, Beads is such a long cooldown, still such a long cooldown, but once again, it's the one that eats through and forces Sops to fall back. Fear No Evil, not going to be enough though. Heed, still looking to chase them down, is going to go deep into the backline looking for Sops as the rest of the team is chasing down those on the left-hand side. Heed, maybe just looking for a kill, maybe tunnel vision a little bit, and finally pulls back on the reins there. Speed buffs, any steals they can have. Fire Giant only there for about 50 more seconds. There's one tower still left standing for Gone to Tahiti. I wouldn't be surprised if Elevate just tried to take that one down.
I don't think that this is a moment where you want to try and siege left Phoenix with only 40 seconds left on your Fire Giant. I agree. I think that you want to just go right, grab this tier 2 every time, get your guaranteed gold, get some extra map pressure, and another win condition where you can just run it up right. If you end up winning this Fire Giant fight, back, reset, push all of your waves, and be ready to go whenever it's time for fire.
Well, geez, talk about vision. There were 5 Sentry Wards there online for Gone to Tahiti and a few others that were normalized as they're now trying to get out here and just find, well, ideally any ward Elevate have, take care of that, and as well, just get them some vision. More than likely on the right-hand side, Fire Giant going to be coming up in a little over a minute, and this buff disappearing right about now for the members of Elevate. And you've got to decide. I mean, that Fury was, just a few seconds behind Fire Giant, kind of done in retaliation by Gone to Tahiti, and I believe it was a Primal Fury, so maybe having a little bit of an edge in the Fire Giant Pyromancer conversation, but, I mean, in terms of team fight, they haven't really been hitting the marks yet to make that difference. I wonder if they can find something here, though. Mollusk with a Fear No Evil could try and find some early picks.
Like that idea by Gone to Tahiti and Mollusk. They saw Bluegan charging up that World Weaver, just waiting for Red Buff to respawn, and if Bluegan's looking down the scope right there, then he probably doesn't have enough information to see a blink over the wall straight into a Fear No Evil, but ended up coming up in time, the Red Buff did, and Renjaru shows up, and all of a sudden the that play doesn't look quite as good for Gone to Tahiti. So they show some good restraint and back off, but I like the idea initially.
Well, unfortunately, that forced back off is now hurting him even more as Bluegan, it doesn't even matter if he fires it. Once he does, though, it's going to be a great lockdown. Sanctified Field's coming out as well. Dharmic Pillars, everything dropped in this corner of the jungle, but it's not going to be enough to save Mollusk. The Fear No Evil, on the other hand, will be just barely enough to get him out of there. Unfortunately, Sops gets left for the Sharks, or the Piranhas at this point, as they continue to eat down Mando Warrior. Double kill for Bluegan, and now a Fire Giant on the chopping block for them, and I don't see Elevate having much issue taking this one down.
I think Elevate continues to overcommit on a Cope a little bit, and it continues to not matter a whole lot, because Cope gets barrel stuffed by that World Weaver. Sanctified Field came out as well. I'm fine with the World Weaver, just gotta be holding Sanctified Field for better moments, but Heat and Spreen and Monster Bomber just do enough on the front line to make sure that it doesn't matter that they don't have a whole lot of support coming from the backline damage dealers.
Well, that's a post 30-minute Fire Giant, so it will be enhanced for them. They get aggressive here. One Phoenix on the right down. Mid Phoenix is weakened, but they don't seem to care about that at all. It's going to be Cope once again. That is the target here. He's going to make it out alive another time, aggro, but the Titan is a different story. It's getting shredded down like it's nothing, and Elevate turn that advantage into a win. Find themselves up 1-0 against Gone to Tahiti.
I really like the way Elevate played. in that game. I think that gone to Tahiti, I was kind of expecting the team that has looked better overall, I think, coming into this set to be able to weather that storm a little bit better. I was waiting for the big team fight to come through for Gone to Tahiti there, and it just never really came. Elevate was able to keep themselves on the offensive every single time, and that's the right understanding of their composition's identity. I mean, you don't want to be on the back foot with Neith Sobek. Those are just not gods that do well whenever they have to answer to the enemy team's priority. Elevate made sure that they held on to that priority in basically every single fight by starting it off with those World Weavers early.
And even Bellini agrees with you there in the background, saying the World Weaver seems to have been the problem. At least that's what I'm getting out of it. I have no idea if she was paying enough attention to have seen that one. But, I mean, 3 people over 20,000 damage, Spreen just there under. And even, well, if you take away Monster Bomber, the lowest damage that you see on Elevate is higher than the highest you got to see out of Gone to Tahiti. So maybe some focus there that they just never were able to find the team fight they wanted to. And poor Diesel. I mean, 12,000 damage for a Freya is not a lot to do, even if you are finding fights there. It just never really got to come to fruition. Very early on, they focused him down, and I think from very early on, it never got to go anywhere because of this. And we were maybe highlighting it as, yeah, once you get your items online, you're still Freya, but even after he got the items online, they just didn't let him into the fight.
They really didn't, and then a lot of that credit goes to Spreen and Tahiti, because I thought those two played the backline fights really, really well. I don't think that you can necessarily ban something like Neith going into this game, but I think you can definitely ban Ama, and that's where I'd be starting if I were Gone to Tahiti, because I thought he was that impactful on that pick.
Definitely something, yeah, you have to look at, you have to consider throughout all of this. And Spreen, I've been getting more and more views of Raven, and for a lot of what discussions I had about him originally, it felt like you hit level 12, and then if you don't have this massive lead, maybe you start to fall off, and maybe that's still true. But honestly, there seems to be a lot of consistency so far in these Raven picks, especially in the SCC, in turning that level 3 gank if they go for it, or maybe level 5 if they wait a little bit, into just such a massive lead that there's not much you can do to really stop them or slow them down.
I agree. I think that you're right to recognize that these Ravens are performing even into the mid to late game, because I really don't think that Raven is one of those characters that needs to have this massive lead come level 12. He has one-shot potential on carries from minute 3 to minute 43 if he needs to. I mean, the itemization for Assassins is so strong. He's so good with Erendite. And he just has so many safety valves in his kit to let you get out of danger that as a mid laner, I'm always scared of Robin. It really doesn't matter what time of game it is.
Well, it'll have to be, so many questions I think that have to be answered going into game number 2. But it really is going to be, like you said and highlighted, the Amaterasu that I think it has been kind of a nuisance. And again, 25% win rate going into that game was 9th pick out of all 10 that came through. So she wasn't highly prioritized, even though she had such a phenomenal game. The Raven, on the other hand, the Olorun, both being highly prioritized for him. And even though maybe all of the Sanctified Fields didn't hit the exact mark, I think they all did their job, which sometimes is just warding away the enemy and keeping them locked away from the jungle. So a lot of pressure, I think, onto Tahiti now to take what was and felt like a great late-game team fight-oriented composition and trying to figure out how to make that work against Elevate. I almost forgot their name.
It happens, Gore. We're still early here on Sunday. Look, I think that overall, I agree that the Amaterasu has got to go. I just think that it's difficult whenever everyone on Elevate has a really, really good game 1. I mean, you look even at Monster Bomber, who's stepping in and playing. I thought they had a fantastic game on the Sobek. I was impressed with their relic usage, which is a big deal for supports. Was always on time with the shells and the cursed unks. Was accurate with the vast majority of their plucks. I mean, that's a pick that you don't want to play against again if you're on Gone to Tahiti. But unfortunately, you've only got so many bans. You can't take away everything.
Yeah, that's something they're going to have to address here as we do move into picks and bans for game number 2 and see what Elevate are going to do for this one. Because I think a lot of their strengths, especially throughout that last one, kind of relied on that World Weaver. A lot of those early game initiations were World Weaver. I think they could still get it done, but maybe not as aggressively with that Neith, or without that Neith, I guess I should say. But it seems like Gone to Tahiti, even though their first pick are going to go ahead and ban away the Freya. I think it didn't work out for them once, and they're just saying no.
I think they're right to do so, and that's where having rough games on high prioritization gods really warps picks and bans very, very quickly, because I don't think Ganta Tahiti would have ever thought they'd be coming in to this set in first pick and first ban Freya themselves, but when you have a game like that, you're kind of forced to.
And it's that awkward moment where it's just like, we're banning it because we don't want you to have it, but also we kind of don't want us to have it. And maybe it's we're not going to pick it, but you're also kind of banning it away from Diesel, let's be honest. So either way, it's going to control the flow there. Yamoja, Oleron, Persephone joining those bans down there, Cthulhu, and you could take the pick of the litter for whatever that last god is. So far, out of the 6, 5 of them are pretty much all standards from what we've seen. Usually Amaterasu could fill this slot to kind of make up for that Cthulhu, but it's Hercules, which I think Ganta Tahiti, I mean, you're looking for early game pressure. He's a pretty good, cause of early game pressure.
I was going to say Nemesis is open right now, Amaterasu's open, but Ganta Tahiti get a first pick. The Sobek, this is a comfort pick there for Cope, and wanting to take it away from how well Monster Bomber played it, I guess, does make sense. But if I'm Elevate, I'm snap locking Amanem, and I'm feeling really good about my chances to complete the sweep up against Ganta Tahiti.
Yeah, as of right now, the Amaterasu rings true. I can't think of many reasons to ignore a Nemesis, especially with a Sobek on the other side, so they're going to be able to lock that down. He has CC immunity in his ult, so maybe he can escape her sometimes, but I don't know if it's going to be consistent enough to lock it through. It kind of feels like what we saw last game, where there's just 2 really solid picks here for Elevate to start things off, that it's going to be hard to argue against them for the rest of the picks and bans. But there's the Uller that Sops was running through that last game. Kronos making an appearance here. Not someone we get to see too often aggro, and honestly, it's kind of for good reason.
I agree. I think Kronos is below the line of where I think the best characters in the game are right now. I don't think Kronos is a bad god. I just don't think he's as good as other picks that you could be going for. If you really wanted a magical ADC to balance out Sops going with Uller mid, as I'd guess, I think Sol is a better option. She just kind of does everything a little bit better than Kronos, save for killing towers at the very end of the game and his 50-minute sort of team power spike that he gets by just getting into a game that lasts that long. But overall, I think Sol is just a much safer selection in that moment, and especially when your early game went as badly as it did for Diesel, I don't necessarily like him going to an even worse early game character that can get bullied even more easily.
Yeah, now against the Nemesis, I mean, Kronos has some survivability, can stun you, and, well, I guess increase his own movement speed to try and outrun you, but realistically it's the rewind that keeps him into it. But hey, I'll let the stats speak for themselves. He's got a 100% win rate, so I guess there is that, but numbers like that can change pretty easily around here. And I don't know, Amaterasu, Nemesis, Kepri, Rom seems like a pretty good counter to a Kronos over there. So a lot of pressure onto Diesel once again. But like you said, he gets better with time, so if you can just prolong the game, you might be able to, just put him into those late game team fights and make him make that difference. I don't know, though, if Sobek, Uller, Ratatoska are really the combo that comes to my mind as trying to force a long game.
And then Achilles as well. So it's like Ganta Tahiti have kind of made this taco where everything fits together, and it's a good looking taco. But then they've got like bacon in there, and it's like, well, yeah, bacon's good, but is it good with this taco? I just don't know that Kronos is really the missing piece to the puzzle here for Ganta Tahiti. I mean, it's Sobek, pretty early game in my mind. Uller, at least in support he is. Uller, early game. Ratatoska, early game. Achilles, early game.
Yeah.
Kronos, super late game. Maybe they're just trying to make sure that he gets there with these early game picks.
Well, I am getting one thing out of this, and that is that I need to make a note to self to try to put bacon in my tacos in the future, because that sounds actually like it could be delicious. I don't know how it will mix.
It could be.
But we could figure it out, and that's what I'm getting out of the draft for Ganta Tahiti, is that bacon might be able to fit well with tacos. Otherwise, Kronos might be able to fit well with the rest of this composition, but that might is maybe more of a stretch than anything involving bacon or any conversation about food. Merlin locked in there as well for Elevate. Man, I'm I'm having difficulties. I'm supposed to make it sound even. I'm supposed to, but that's a really solid lineup for Elevate. I'm excited to see how they can run it, or even better, how Gone to Tahiti here can maybe try to fight against it, because it's actually a Chronos mid, which is something we've seen a few players in Europe don't mind running this. And so Sop's picking it up. You get Diesel on something that I think, especially alongside of Sobek, is a kill lane. This could be a different flavor of play.
Yeah, this is. I do think that this is likely overall better than Uller mid Chronos ADC, because you just have a lane to lean on now. If you're Mollusk, and Ratatoskr leans on lanes pretty effectively most of the time. He just has such great kill potential in the early game that it's pretty easy for him to early gank a lane that has pressure, and that certainly could be Gone to Tahiti in this matchup. So maybe I was gonna say maybe my Bacon analogy was a bad one, because Bacon's probably good on just about anything, but maybe it's more right than I thought it was. Maybe it sounded better by the minute.
Well, I'm excited to see if Sops is... I'm trying to think of a good antithesis to Bacon to throw into a taco, something that would not fit in at all for any meal, but you could chat your creative, maybe even more so culinarily than I am, so I'm excited to see what you could say about that kind of thing. But Rinjaro switching from Olorun to Rom, you got the plushy Khepri. I feel like this is going to be a deadly duo lane. Maybe it's going to take a little bit more time for Elevate to enter that state, but all in all, this feels like something that could just fight the entire time.
They've got some strength to them for sure, but I just don't think that they'll be able to match the Sobek Uller kill pressure. I mean, Khepri brings good kill pressure to the laning phase because of his CC and how much protection he can give to his teammates by adding that damage mitigation but mostly through his own CC. With Rom as well, who's usually pretty good at clearing early on, as long as he's got a full quiver of astral arrows, it can be tough.
Well, geez, speaking of tough, Monster Bomber just in a wrong spot, but no, the grab turnaround's going to be even better. Locks Mollusk down, and nobody on Gone to Tahiti was prepared for that. Monster Bomber not even breaking a sweat in the middle of it. That shell working its magic to keep him alive, and that first blood comes out of what feels like nowhere for Elevate.
And that's huge, because now instead of losing your red buff and getting first blooded, you just first blooded the enemy and got your own red buff. So you're in a really good spot now if you're Elevate. Mollusk a little bit behind. That's going to delay him finishing that Acorn 3. I understand Gone to Tahiti wanting to be the aggressors in that moment. I mean, you've got Sobek, Uller, Rat. How do we ever lose? Well, if they've got 4 and we've got 3. Sops was a little bit late to that fight in around the jungle, whereas Blugan was there right away for his own red buff spawn.
They still want to get aggressive in the duo lane. Cope consistently looking for a pluck, some sort of setup. And Mollusk back over here, and I'm curious to see what Acorn Mollusk ends up going, but because of that first blood happening onto him, it's going to take him a little bit more time to finalize what he decides to pick up. But it's a purple buff sweep and steal away. So Gone to Tahiti trying to fight back wherever they can find it, even if it's just small little excursions into the experience that Elevate will no longer have access to.
Looks like Mando's not going to have access to this blue buff anymore. With Mollusk putting pressure on that left-hand side, it opens up a leak on the right, and Elevate there and ready to go in order to exploit that. And Spreen hasn't even backed for that Golden Blade quite yet, or the boots, whichever he chooses to go first, as sometimes Nemesis doesn't actually rush the Golden Blade, but buys it after boots. So you've got kind of options now if you're Elevate. Do we want to start defending our left side if we can keep getting invaded once we hit level 5, once we have that Nem ult in particular that can set us up for a lot of easy success? Or do we just want to dedicate ourselves to keeping Mando Warrior behind and setting Heat up for another great game like he had in game number 1? I think Elevate, the safer option is just camping the right-hand side and getting Heat ahead, but they could get ahead very, very quickly and really blow Gone to Tahiti out if some fights on this left-hand side go their way like the First Blood did.
It's maybe a little more risky overall, but like you said, it'll look better for him. Of course, Heed had a phenomenal game on that Amaterasu last time around. Seems to be doing just fine so far. I mean, nothing crazy's been going on over in Soul Lane, much like you wouldn't expect. But Dazzling Offense going to be used. just when you think they might be able to find something interesting. Of course, it is still just a boxing match over there. How many rounds they can go against each other before the rotations start to come through. I'm still giving, I think, more credit to Heed than I see out of Mando just yet, but those executes, it's one of those abilities that's easy to sleep on for how impactful it can be. Especially in a moment like this. Lockdown looking good against Heed, but they haven't been able to find too much. There's finally the pluck, and the execute. Gonna miss Heed with a beautiful step, is looking to run away Mollusk. The cooldowns have to be there for you. This should still be a kill, and it just barely is. Unfortunately for Spreen, there's not much he can do on his own. In fact, Mollusk maybe even looking for more here. He knows the team is there. It's going to be a good stun onto one. The pluck not going to be able to connect. The Nemesis ult doing its best to keep him alive, and Mollusk just out of range that time, goes up into the air. Kronos is here, and Kronos is going to find his way into the mix as well. Some interesting kills from Gone to Tahiti.
They find two, and two they are probably pretty happy to grab. A great stun through the wall there from Mollusk tells me that is the stun acorn for sure. For him, no way a 3 acorn acorn blast ever gets the stun there. So that ends up showing its prowess pretty early on. Spreen ends up dying, even though I think he had a pretty good idea on that Nem ult, just stealing the protections away from the tanky Sobek instead of the Ratatosker, but ultimately ended up not mattering a whole lot because of a good rotation in from Sops.
And just being able to find and finalize a kill, I think onto Heat is most important, but honestly, being able to pick up, well, a kill for Sops is going to be beneficial no matter what. But Sops now doesn't have any mana, doesn't have a lot of life to work with. Rinjaru tries to rotate in, forced to go up into the sky, looking for some snipes. Not going to aim over the wall into the mid lane for Sops, or at the mid laner, that is Sops. Instead, he's going to come back down. Spreen is lost. He's low there for Rinjaru as well. Now, no mana for Sops. What are you doing? You're getting aggressive. I don't know if they have enough here, but it doesn't seem to be stopping Mollusk at all. Tries to get aggressive. Red buff has just spawned in, so they'll be able to at least sweep that away, or try to. This feels a little concerning for Gone to Tahiti, but they're still going to get away with it.
And they still are ahead right now, and another good individual play by Diesel in that moment to find a long-range combo onto Spreen and get that kill, but now Sop's in trouble in mid. Beads are good enough to save his life, but now with no rewind and no purification beads, if I'm Spreen, I know where I'm going with my next ultimate, because it should be an easy one for him.
We'll have to see how long it's going to take him, though, before he starts making more of an impact here. Elevate off to a much different start in Game 2 than they had in Game 1, although still not too far behind in terms of gold, 800, 900, which is still enough to feel uncomfortable, but not enough for Gone to Tahiti to be taking the lead fully. And this kind of, starts to open up the questions. I mean, Sops, a big part of one kill, not a big part of any others after that, but it's Diesel right now that needs to be concerned. Rinjaru goes for the rotate, not going to be able to make it up into the air, saves the ult, but at the cost of his life. Diesel is incredibly low. Monster Bomber might look to get aggressive here, but I don't know if a Lonely Khepri is going to be enough, so that's going to be all she wrote in the duo lane. And I was going to talk about the mid laner, but I guess it's even better to talk about these hunters. Right now, Diesel's off to a much better game than he had in Game 1.
2-0 and ahead on the Uller, as opposed to 0-2 or 0-3 and very far behind on the Freya. But as we mentioned, I mean, this is what Uller kind of has to do in comparison to Freya, who can still survive despite a bad start.
All right, now it's all about surviving if you're Elevate. Last time around, it was Gone to Tahiti that were the ones dancing around their tier 2s, maybe a little scared of the engagement. Spreen now feeling what it's like to get blink stun locked down, but not killed out. This is the consistency I had actually alluded to in Game 1. Once you have the timer on that red buff, it's much easier, usually, to try and get back in there, as long as you have the pressure you want. It seems to be opening up a lot of opportunities for Gone to Tahiti to strip farm away and make Elevate's lives just more uncomfortable than ever.
A little bit awkward right now for Spreen, because he's kind of losing his whole jungle over and over and over again. I mean, you look at the net worth charts, he's second from the bottom overall in the game right now, whereas Mollusk is on the upper half. About a 600 gold lead for Mollusk just individually, as Gone to Tahiti's opened up a pretty wide lead early on in the game.
Well, now it's Mollusk again, looking to make a play. Gonna come dashing in a little short on the ult, but the damage is still there. Ranjaru's up in the sky, finds a lot of good snipes, but the damage just isn't there. One, maybe two more autos could have done it, but unfortunately for him, he doesn't have the time. Gone to Tahiti taking this early game pressure. It still feels like the Kronos is the odd man out, but it doesn't seem to matter for them because the other four are putting in a lot of work right now to make sure they have this lead that could potentially just get them so far ahead you don't have to worry about a late game Kronos.
And that's the idea of 4 of these 5 gods. And credit to Sops, I mean, he's ahead right now in comparison to Blugan. I still think Blugan will end up doing a lot more in team fights if there were a true 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 at this point. And that's not Sops' fault necessarily. It's just that what his god is capable of doing at this point in the game in comparison to what a Merlin is doing or capable of doing at this point in the game are pretty vastly different things. But, I mean, you look at the experience difference right now between Cope and Monster Bomber, that's a concern for Elevate. They're all of a sudden down 2,500 gold just 10 minutes in. That is a pretty drastic lead for Gods Tahiti.
Well, now they're trying to push it again even further. Hasn't been able to turn anything into a Gold Fury just yet, but these buffs have not been going the way of Elevate pretty much the entire game. So, unless they can turn something very soon, feels like it might get out of hand here for Elevate, as now Monster Bomber, promise you, he existed there for a second, but not long enough to be able to get even his own ult off to try and prolong his life, although I have a feeling it wouldn't have gone much more in his favor. So Ranjaru forced to play over here alone. Mando goes down over there in the solo lane thanks to Spreen, but you see that gank, you already got a kill into the support over here. That screams Gold Fury for Gone to Tahiti. The snipes, wait, Ranjaru's in the area, not going to be able to find it in time. I got excited when I saw him go up. Unfortunately, though, he's a little too slow, and now they know that ult's not available. He's going to be susceptible to this gank.
And he's dead to this gank, an easy one for Diesel and for Mollusk. You gotta give up that wave right away if you're Ranjaru, but Lord knows you can't because you're down 3 levels to Diesel in this game. I mean, 1 and 3 in comparison to the 4, 0, and 1 on the other side. Elevate is really just hoping that Heat is going to come up big in this game at this point because it's kind of looking like it's going to be on his shoulders with how this duo lane has gone. A combined 6 levels down for Elevate on the left side of the map.
That's rough. I'm trying to think of any other way to describe it, but rough just seems to be the one that is going to hit most consistently for it. Heat, though, has a little bit of an experience lead, so maybe that's something to write home about for Elevate. That was a very big condition for them in the late game in game number 1, so we'll have to see what Heat can do as these rotations start to come online. We're only 12 minutes in, so we haven't gotten to see a whole lot out of these solo laners just yet, and honestly, when it comes to team fight potential, I feel like watching an Amaterasu with a Merlin behind her is going to be a little bit more impactful than Achilles with Kronos behind them. So Gone to Tahiti, going to have to be careful, but Kronos still hits hard late game. He doesn't have much attack speed. In fact, isn't going any of the rings so far, which is a little curious to me, but maybe it's just something that fits better in mid for Kronos.
I agree with your skepticism here, Gormizer. If you're going Kronos, you at least need Hecate early on. I feel like it's just so good that it's just not worth not going that item ever.
Ooh, what a beautiful ult from Monster Bomber. Keeps Ranjaru alive for a little bit. Shell even popped at the end there, I think thinking a couple more abilities would hit than they did, so that one maybe not going completely where they needed it to, but they stay alive, which is more than they could say about a lot of these fights for Elevate so far. 7-2, read the kills for Gone to Tahiti as they look to try and pressure out this mid-tier 1. Blugan's still hanging around. Heed now is in the area. Dazzling Offensive is going to be the target. Where does he go? It's going to be Sops that gets locked down. Can't get that ult off in time, and that's going to be one that they are able to pull back in their favor. Cope isn't able to find anything. Mollusk unable to find anything with their ults. That's 2 burned on Gone to Tahiti with no returns.
It's a poor death there for Sops. I mean, you die with both relics up and without getting your rewind off. Just too greedy with the timing on that. Didn't respect the damage coming out from Elevate. And I don't know if he just didn't have information. There is a ward on top left, but maybe Spreen was hiding behind the wall a little bit too much. But those are the kind of deaths that you really cannot afford to have with a lead like this, because you're up 3K almost, 2,500 still for Gone to Tahiti. you really don't want to start giving shutdown bonuses away, because that's one of the easiest ways to let the enemy team back into the game. If Diesel dies to Renjaru here, I'll bet you Renjaru would get a full level from it. Not to mention all the extra farm that he would get after the fact. So, kill bounties are really, really valuable this season in Smite, and it's something you really do have to play around.
As someone, again, I play a lot of support, and you can see, I've been in Monster Bomber's shoes before. When you're level 8, the guy that you're trying to kill is now level 15. I'm telling you, if Monster Bomber hits that, he's getting 2 levels off of it. Like, it feels ridiculous when you see a death, and like, you're like, cool, I leveled up. Then you hit your level up ability, and you're like, wait, I have another one I can work with. And that's something that maybe is going to have to come into play here for Elevate. They need more happening. The support 3 levels down, as you've highlighted, but that means that Cope is going to be able to get that second relic online much faster. And speaking of which, you know, Renjaru still doesn't have his available, no Aegis on that Hunter just yet. So a lot of still susceptible damage over there in the duo lane. Maybe it's not worth as much for Gauntlet Tahiti to go over there, but they're easy kills. They
really are. I mean, it's a level 8 Khepri is no threat at all, as Blugan under threat from Mollusk has to use those purification beads. Nice play by Mollusk. Just get in there, get some space, get a relic, and get out. Doesn't dash in order to try and finish off the kill and put himself in a bad spot. Gauntlet Tahiti in a fantastic position now in order to win this game. They've got a 5-level lead for Diesel. You should be grouping up and taking every single fight Elevate will give you as long as Diesel is a part of the conversation, because no one can match his damage right now.
And this is the second time I've come into this game, or, well, this set, where I'm thinking one draft just feels like it should play better than the other. And I think Elevate still have room to grow. The problem is having the time to grow into that more than anything. It doesn't seem like Gauntlet Tahiti are giving them much to work with. Now Oni Fury is spawned up over here. Left lane, they already have so much control that I think I agree with you. You know, not only force whatever fight Elevate will give you, but also any objective that you're able to, go for it. It might as well try to lock him down, but Mollusk uses his ult, looking for the knockups. Going into the background onto Renjaru, not even going to bother with the follow-up for the damage. Instead, it's Monster Bomber once again taking a lot of damage. Mollusk gets burned down before anybody can assist him. Now they're trying to fight it out, but Elevate seem to be running away with this one. Heed looking to try and lock out Sops. He uses the beads, though, so he's able to walk away. They lose the Oni Fury, they lose their pressure. They get a kill, which feels a little worthwhile for them. It's going at least a little bit better than that fight could have.
Experience in Elevate's favor, but gold, still the nod goes to Gauntlet Tahiti. And honestly, experience is more important to Elevate right now than gold. So if they had to choose which one they'd rather get more of, I think experience is the call. But it's not enough in order to really blow the game back into their favor. They need to kill Sops while his beads and rewind are down.
Monster Bomber caught out. Doesn't seem to be dead just yet. In execute range, and Mando looks to go for it. Not going to be able to find that kill. And then Khepri ult going to get the resurrect there. So Mando, an unfortunate set of circumstances, means that they're now out of an ult and out of the execute to try and burn through it. Most of the time, though, you need that execute for the Khepri ult, so I guess it's a win-win in that kind of scenario. Now it's Pyromancer started up, and even though we've been talking about this Kronos as maybe not necessarily this late-game carry that comes online too fast, he seems to be hitting hard just fine, and, well, it's not like he has much to oppose him. Renjaru put down into the ground once again. Level 14, spent a lot of time farming, still hasn't picked his second relic yet.
Yeah, he was on the map for a while. Has to imagine that he's going to be able to get at least something of value. Yeah, gets to Atalanta's boat too, at the very least. And now has his Aegis. I think Renjaru is making the right call. I mean, there's no point in him being a part of these fights. He didn't even have his Devo gloves even close to stacked before he started just solo pushing left. So even though he got killed, I still think that's the right space for Renjaru to be in.
Yeah, 18 minutes in, still hasn't gotten that final stack online for it. It's going to be Fire Giant. Heed, a good dash. Keeps him alive and out of danger for now. Mollusk getting knocked up. Actually, a lot of damage being done to Gauntlet Tahiti here in the Fire Giant pit. And they're forced to fall back. Kind of an awkward stagger. It's not going to give anything over to Elevate. If this was even, maybe they move in and they're able to do something with that Fire Giant. Because of how far behind they are, they just successfully don't lose the game.
Hey, that's okay. You know, if
that's a huge win.
Is on the table, yeah, if losing the game's on the table, then if you could choose not losing the game, I think you're pretty okay with that if you're Elevate, even though it certainly isn't a necessarily win for you quite yet. But still, Gone to Tahiti is in this position where Elevate has to capitalize on a Gone to Tahiti mistake in order to win this game. I mean, if this plays out as it should, as the percentages would give you, I think we're going to see a game 3.
That's all up to Gone to Tahiti to seal the deal on that one. And they've got a decent lead, almost 5,000 gold, kind of getting chunked at here by Elevate, and they're doing something that we've seen a lot of teams do recently, where, hey, we can't contest this Fire Giant. In fact, there's no chance. So we're just going to take your tier 2 in the process, try to get some gold back in our favor, take a small win, and force you to fall back. And as you can see, Mando coming out of the base, so they have successfully drawn some attention to that left-hand side of the map. I just don't know if it's enough, considering you still have Diesel and crew running around over here on the right-hand side of the map. 3 tier 2 towers still standing for Elevate. This looks pretty much like the same game state we were in last time, except now it's Gone to Tahiti in the driver's seat.
It's worth noting that there hasn't really been a full 5-on-5 that Gone to Tahiti has won. There really was only one of them, and it was that fight around the Oni Fury that Elevate technically won. They got a 1-for-0 in that fight, so Gone to Tahiti has to find a way to win the full 5-on-5, but they are well equipped to do so right now, Gore. I mean, still a 3-level lead for Diesel. The itemization gap has closed between Diesel and Renjaru. I guess Diesel going for a Heartseeker means that he's got too much, it's too much gold to get up front, but maybe after stripping those tier 2s, he can be a little bit closer.
I'm scared of Diesel coming into these fights hitting harder. Any item that he is able to buy off is immediately going to end up hurting Elevate even more. So I thought Spreen was going to go for something else. Instead, a pseudo-lazy back, let's call it. Maybe a bait more than anything in terms of his back there. Mando and Mollusk hanging around in the jungle. And as far as Fire Giants go, I mean, 2 tier 2s, it's par for the course as of right now. But they don't seem to be grouped up in a very strong way. Maybe a Gold Fury to make things even more in their favor. Will help out Diesel, help out Sops, especially as they look to transition to that late game state. Where now this Chronos is definitely going to start being much more of a factor than we see. 2-1-0, not necessarily a non-factor, but I think now he's becoming an ever-present threat.
This is the point where even though Merlin has really, in credit to Blugan, been able to keep up pretty well. I mean, he's not down very much gold. He's the same level. They have very similar item looks right now in the mid lane, despite Gone to Tahiti being up by 10k 22 minutes in. Blugan's been able to stay pretty close, but at this point, you would anticipate that Chronos is finally hitting his stride. 5.5 items into the build, level 18. He's going to continue to get stronger. That's the Chronos passive. He gets power for every minute that goes by. But I do think that Blugan is just now starting to get surpassed by the potential damage output. Though don't forget, I mean, Merlin's no slouch when it comes to late game fights. No. The Obsidian Shard instead of the Soul Reaver in that slot, likely because Blugan the team was far behind, so he prioritized the extra penetration instead of the actual outright best damage item across the board. So not having Soul Reaver at this point does hurt him for sure.
We'll have to see what he can do here. He's taking a ton of damage, though, as he gets plucked in the back. And unfortunately for him, he's not going to be able to get much done. Blugan, though, returns the kill onto Cope. Snipes coming down from Renjaru. Forces Sops to go into that rewind. That's going to be 3 ults burned. 4 ults burned now from Gone to Tahiti. If they can lock down a little bit more, that's going to be a good bounce back. That's Sops that's been taken off the board. And now they have a numbers advantage, looking to try and chase it down. Diesel still does a huge chunk of damage, and I think that's enough to ward them off. And I love the way that Gone to Tahiti play that. They start their back, but in a position where they could ambush Elevate had they gotten too aggressive. They lose 2 big ones, though, trying to get in on that left Phoenix, and that's just solid for Elevate.
He clearly could not tank as well as he could in Game 1, just based on the way the game has gone. But even though they lost Heed really early in that fight because of a very good execute from Mando Warrior, Renjaru put in some damage in that fight, man. I mean, he is 2nd overall in player damage despite being still down at XP. He's still only level 18. Had some good shots on the Sops off a fantastic route from Monster Bomber. Sops again dies with both relics up. That time at least he used the rewind, but you can't let your Chronos die without every possible option that you use to try and save him. I mean, you are now looking at this composition. Sops is the most valuable player on the map for Gone to Tahiti. He's the one who's going to do the most work for them at this point. So they have to be more wary of where he is and how to save his life.
Well, geez, talking about Heat and how he's not as tanky. He gets caught out by one axe, half health, before he can get anything done. Now Mando, maybe looking to get aggressive. Mollusk up on the tree branch is going to come down, knock up, and execute going to come through, but it's not going to connect onto Heed. Once again, Mando unable to find that one. That's going to be 2 ults burned by Gone to Tahiti. 3 ults, though, burned there for Elevate. Of course, I'm counting Merlin in there because I just glanced at the diamond. So 2 ults burned there for Elevate in reality. But they're keeping pace with Gone to Tahiti right now. Even though they're 10,000 gold down, these late-game fights aren't going the way you would expect, and it goes back to what you were discussing with the way these drafts have gone. Sops forced to use his ult to stay alive, but Diesel, one of the highest priority targets, burned down by Blugan thanks to that Merlin damage, and that helps set this fight up for Elevate if they can get in there. Monster Bomber, low, no ult available. Same thing there for Rinjaru, low, and no ult available for them. Staying alive is priority number 1. Mando looks to get aggressive. Cope as well, trying to lead the charge for Sops and Mollusk. Unable to find anything, but Mollusk going to have that tree available in a second to jump around in the event they want to lock him down. It seems like they're going to cancel the Fire Giant call. Look for some aggression here. Goes in on Heed, of all people, and they're still looking for the fight. A misblock, though, from Cope puts him in a bad spot aggro, and this looks like it should be another kill. One more hit, and Rinjaru, credit for it all. Still 1 level down, but hitting as hard as you need him to, and they're able to turn this much more heavily in their favor.
Man, I just don't know how neither Sops nor Diesel heard that TPN from Heed, and that really set this up very, very easily now for Elevate, who still down 10k, by the way, are the ones on fire.
Oh, geez, Sops, I swear to you, I promise, he was there, but the crits ring true for Rinjaru. Now the stuns looking to come in for Heed. This is a dangerous game. Diesel just respawned. You've got 45 seconds without a mid laner, 12 seconds still without Cope. A permanent 3v5 is what it feels like. And you have to defend minions on left. Mando not going to be around. Elevate. Take the Fire Giant. 26 minutes in, still 8,000 gold down, but it doesn't look like that's going to be enough to stop them and shut them out of this game.
I don't know how, Gormizer. I mean, Gone to Tahiti had an exorbitant lead. They just have not been able to team fight well at all in this game. They've missed relic usage, just not paying attention to the map overall. I still don't know how Sops and Diesel don't hear that teleport or don't see it pop up on the map. You can see it whenever someone's TPing the ward. They don't check. They both get flanked. Diesel loses some relics and gets killed. Sops has to use rewind. Sops again dies after the fact without using a single relic, continuing to save them for next game. And Mollusk and Cope and Mando are just not able to find enough on the front line anymore because Elevate's getting into the late game now. And so the early game power of Ratatosker and Achilles isn't quite as potent as it once was. You know, they do need that help from the back line in order to get in there. And I gotta give credit, Gore. I mean, despite how awful the laning phase in the early game was for Rinjaru, and it was really bad, he's putting damage in the team fights, man. He's top overall in the game, and that's not easy to do as an ADC from behind.
Oh, once again, Blink Pluck gonna miss from Cope. Damage ringing true. He's low, but he's not dead just yet. They're going to be able to find that Spreen. Credit for the kill. Rinjaru went up. Rinjaru came down from his ultimate. Some damage spread out. Mando, just wrong place, bad spot. Merlin damage going to be more than enough to burn that down. That Soul Reaver you were looking for earlier, it's online now, and 3-0-6 is Blugan as they're looking to tear down this Tier 2 tower like it's nothing. Diesel, Sops. It's a lot of damage still on the table for Gone to Tahiti, but not a lot of setup to make it work.
Now you gotta. I know I've been pretty critical of the back line here for Gone to Tahiti, but that one's on the front line, just way too deep. No way that they'd ever get any help from the damage dealers.
Well, now it's up to the damage dealers trying to defend this one. Spreen, Blugan taking a lot at the very beginning, and the crits are ringing true right now for Diesel. Have Felnot, I think, making a little bit of a difference for them, but it's the question of whether or not it'll be enough to thwart them from the Titan, and apparently the answer is yes. I thought we would see a little bit more, but the respawn timers from Gone to Tahiti may be affecting Elevate's decision. And they're going to choose to back here instead of knock down this last tower, spend some of that gold. But, you know, we were spending a lot of this game talking about level deficits. They're gone. We were talking about experience deficits, gold deficits. It might as well be gone because, in fact, Blugan has finished his last item before you can see Sobs do it. So they've actually been able to turn this around so heavily is Elevate. It's still a deficit, 3,000 gold, but that's impressive.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Elevate has really played these team fights so much better than Gone to Tahiti. And as I said, I mean, they had to wait for Gone to Tahiti to make some mistakes. They certainly did. But I do think that we shouldn't just put blame on Gone to Tahiti's feet. You should also give credit to Elevate with how well they've team fought despite the deficit. Blugan still hasn't died, which is very difficult to do as a mid laner when the enemy team is as far ahead as Gone to Tahiti were. Renjaru, as I've already highlighted, has done a lot of damage in spite of the level and experience and gold deficit that he's been under basically all game. Now Gone to Tahiti have to really win an honest firefight in a completely even setup, if not ahead for Elevate, because at least they're the ones who have that those fire minion pressuring on their side of the map, or going towards Gone to Tahiti's side of the map.
Well, they're going to go ahead and initiate in. Already Renjaru incredibly low, but you can see Capriol keeping him alive longer. Goes up into the sky, looking for some return damage on the snipes. Diesel in the background, aggressed on by Heed. Heed going into the dazzling offensive to look and lock him down. Aegis going to be used, and it's going to be enough to get Diesel out of this one alive, but so is Renjaru right now. Blugan and him incredibly low on the backline, but they're going to get zoned out and stay alive so far. Heed loses his life in the process. Spreen looking for something. I don't know if they're going to be able to find it. Now separated is the jungler from the rest of the pack. That's going to be a burn down kill picked up for Gone to Tahiti. So well played by them to get aggressive and find the picks they needed.
Really, really nice trap sprung by Gone to Tahiti right there. And Elevate just kind of on autopilot a little bit. You have to be on high alert. The reason Elevate didn't go for that tier 2 even when they still had fire in a 5v4 is because they had no relics on anybody except for Heat. Everyone else's relics were down. In that situation, you have to be more respectful of where Gone to Tahiti can be. Renjaru, first one in, needs to get Kepri ulted right away, then a boost speeds by Spreen late in the fight. Just not good identification from Elevate of the game state and what they really had to respect.
The Fire Giant seems to be the next one, but Mando, this is how a lot of these fights have been going so wrong for Gone to Tahiti. Maybe goes too deep, but makes it out alive. With his, well, again, 100 health maybe left standing there for him. But it's going to be instead Monster Bomber, one hit away. This should be easy to be able to pick up. But are you diving too deep? Mollusk lands in the middle of 2 carries, but there's not going to be return damage for him just yet. Diesel is low, and that's going to be Renjaru. The snipe connects along with some other damage to make sure he gets burned down. So far, 1-for-1 support for Carry. Heed doing whatever work he can. Dazzling offensive, trying to get the zone, and it's going to successfully do so, but not enough. Sops with a double kill, going to turn things right back in their favor. Gone to Tahiti find themselves in control of the Fire Giant pit. Blugan, Spreen, still hanging around. But it's whether or not they... Well, never mind. They can't do anything anymore. Spreen gets erased before I can finish the thought.
Yeah, that was a not wise call by Spreen. No beads. You just cannot step up against this composition, man. There's just too much CC for Elevate to walk in. I mean, you've got a stun from Achilles, a stun from Rat, a stun from Kronos, a pluck, and a knockback by Sobek, and a stun from Diesel. Everyone will kill you in that moment. So a very bad decision by Spreen to face check and walk around the Fire Giant. And now, if you're Elevate, you're kind of left in the same awkward position. No relics for Blugan, no relics for Renjaru, no beads for Spreen, though he'll have those up by the time he respawns. I don't know who can actually get into the back line and check now.
Well, unfortunately right now, Monster Bomber doesn't seem to have much life left to him. Execute is there if necessary. Mando, again, just a little bit short. In fact, it ticks the ult. Maybe not going to make that big of a difference. It's the delayed kill. It is 2 seconds extra of your life to try and turn something around, but you never know when 2 seconds might be in your favor. Elevate still pretty far down and now missing a member. Trying to get this Fire Giant's going to be difficult. They're not going to be able to steal it away, but can they do anything with the fight? Blugan, half health, gone before he can even think about what he wants to do next. Rinjaru looking for some snipes, but Diesel manages to stay alive. Mollix finds the knockup, but loses his life in the process. Rinjaru still goes down. Sops has become a monster in this late game. 8-3-4, looking to push it a little further. Spreen, one hit from dead, and he's going to run on out of here. Heat stays alive as well, but that's a 2v4, and those four, they have Fire Giant.
And Elevate just kind of make the call.
Oh, jeez.
They're going to try, yeah, Kronos, by the way, with Enhanced Fire Giant. They don't have relics, and they try and defend fire, and they pay for it pretty quickly.
Well, now the question is if they can defend this Titan, stop this from going to 3 games, or if we're going to end up finding ourselves in another one. The question is now Monster Bomber taking down the Titan, half health, and Sops is just pouring his damage into it. Doesn't seem like anyone's going to be able to stop him this time around. Gone to Tahiti, sweep that one away, ride into the late game, let Sops carry the rest, and they're pushing us to game number 3.
Was a bit of a rockier ride than it probably should have been there, Gore. I mean, that was that should have been done a while ago if he asked Gone to Tahiti, I'm sure, but ultimately, they group up, they stop making quite as many mistakes, and they set up, and Sops does what Kronos is supposed to do in the late game, and that's one-shot towers for you. I mean, 400 in auto means that end is possible, where it might not have been for a lot of other characters.
Unfortunately, I think for all of that, I wish I had been paying more attention to the numbers. 26,000, almost 27,000 player damage towards the very end there, was able to not quite take it away from Rinjaru, who has 6 total damage more than Sops throughout the game, but still impressive, I think, in the turnaround for that Kronos. I felt very much out of sorts early on, but it played pretty much the only way that composition could. I think you get a couple early kills that you need to online for Sops, and then he just transitions into that late game position. I mean, I think it's great. One highlight for Kronos, 6 minutes in. Next highlight for Kronos, we got to jump 30 minutes. He wasn't doing a whole lot in between, but now he was hitting incredibly hard, and that's where the damage was done.
Absolutely, and you're not looking for Kronos to do a whole lot between minutes 26 and 30, to be honest with you. That was a beautiful one over the wall to kill He. That was a well-played fight by Sops for sure, but got to clean up some of that positioning and relic usage, because that was certainly a struggle for him at times in this game.
We'll have to see. I'm always curious when I see something like that. I wonder how you adapt, how you draft around it, right? I mean, hey, we just need to not lose the early game, and then we can win the late game because we have Kronos. Seems like, on paper, yeah, it makes sense, but there's a lot of factors that go into that ended up helping Gone to Tahiti. So how Elevate retaliate is going to be big, but that is more of what you would expect from a team that has, again, been playing at this level for so long, like all of the members of Gone to Tahiti have. So we'll have to see as we go into game number 3 what they're going to change, if they're going to change anything. I mean, it's an interesting pick, that 100% win rate. I kind of mocked it going into game number 2, but it still rings true here for Kronos as he wins another one. Maybe he's the secret.
It's a good point. I think that's fair. I mean, he hasn't lost quite yet. Still feel like the main reason that Gone to Tahiti win that game is because of how well they played the early game. Maybe they needed that Kronos as the insurance come late game because their team fighting was not very good. So that's something that maybe you can draft a little bit better for. Try and pick something that's going to enhance your team fight automatically. Something like a Terra who makes it pretty hard to lose 5-on-5s as long as you can find a good ultimate. But I think that the way that I'd be approaching this game if I'm Elevate is by taking some of these pressure options away from Gone to Tahiti. Take away the Sobek, take away that Ratatosker, and set yourselves up for a more even early game, because I don't think there's any contest on whose team fought better so far. It's definitely been Elevate.
We'll have to see whether or not they can draft something that is going to fit their team. But as we move into picks and bans here for game number 3, winner take all here in this last game. And I always have to, start looking at what do you ban? Is there something specific from these last couple of games? As much as it helped Elevate get back into it, I also think it ended up hurting them a little bit. That Sobek has been right on the edge of exactly what you need out of it, right? And the misplucks turned the fight in your favor immediately, but for every pluck that connected, it was good lockdown for Gone to Tahiti, and so far they've gone it every game.
I agree. I think that Gone to Tahiti was willing to first pick it last game. I wouldn't be surprised if Elevate did so themselves right here, because Gone to Tahiti hasn't shown a prioritization towards the Amaterasu. so maybe you can still get that for Heed. You could still get some other picks later on. Looks like Elevate's actually going to ban the Sobek, and this is interesting now, because now you have to leave open something strong. It looks like it's going to be Freya, and remember, Gonzo Tahiti really struggled with that Freya pick. And in fact, Elevate going to dare them to take it again by first picking the Uller.
I like what they did last time, where it was the Uller Kronos split, putting Kronos in mid. Even though it wasn't the ring build that we kind of expected, I think was a good call for them. But now you're running the risk. You grab this Kronos, you don't have the Uller to offset it. That I think helped them so much earlier on in that dual lane. And so Freya's still available. I mean, Amaterasu now taken is a great pick. But I'm wondering if Gonzo Tahiti are maybe giving something up. I mean, Kronos, yeah, he was great for you, but he's not that high priority either.
I agree. And now Khepri, Monster Bomber fell very far behind in that game. I think they had an okay game on the Khepri, but not as impactful as that Sobek. Nemesis is still open, and Elevate decide not to take it. They take the Hebo as insurance of, hey, don't take Nemesis because we have the counter pick. And Gonzo Tahiti, I don't think was ever going to take Nem in the first place. Why would they when they could just go back to this Ratatosker for Mollusk?
Well, we don't end up in positions like this often, and I'm very happy that we have one upon us. Kronos with the 100% win rate, Khepri with a 0% win rate behind him. Somebody is going to potentially change that here. If Elevate can win, they will change the numbers around. If you know, Tahiti win, then nothing changes, and we're still in the same spot. So we can just get into that, I guess, a little bit later. But you get Neath, you get Morrigan banned out over there by Tahiti, two premier mid laners that we've seen. Although Morrigan not been a big conversation haver, at least this time around. I think a late game Morrigan turning into a late game Kronos, though, could be nuts for a team fight. So maybe a smart ban right there. And then the Hu Yi, the Kuzenbo on the other side. Achilles comes in, Chernabog being picked up for his first time today. It's interesting from Elevate to see the changes they're making.
Looks like it's going to be Hebo jungle. If I had to guess, I would say Chernabog is going to be mid, just knowing Bluegin's Godpool loves to play that Chernabog and is very, very comfortable on it. A Hachiman to round it out for Diesel. Pretty safe. Gives him some fight potential up against the Uller if he can get a lead, but ultimately there just to play safe. I think overall, Gonzo Tahiti have gone with a pretty similar style of composition. Now with that Achilles support, if I had to guess. So it could be Ama support. Cope could certainly bring that back, as we've seen Ama a lot, though not in that support role as of late. Gonzo Tahiti again are going to try and get off to a really early lead, and then use this extra advantage that they have of the Kronos come late game to be a real factor.
Already starting out, Ranjaru gets first damage in the game, therefore Elevate win, so we can go ahead and dust this one off. We know where we're going.
I forgot about that. That was a huge thing back in the day, man. Who got the first auto attack? He just won the game. Man,
I don't know where it came from.
That sounds like a Zapman thing, doesn't it? Or like a Lassus thing, maybe?
That definitely feels... You know what? Now that you've said it, I could see it being Lassus. Him running around in the jungle, smacking someone and being like, all right, guys, we win.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Dude, now I know what I'm doing in my ranked game tonight. I'm just going for first auto, baby, and I should be good to go.
Sometimes it's all that matters. I wish I had any sort of number correlation to the first auto and whether or not you can win a game after you get it. Maybe there's something to be said there, but unfortunately, I'm more curious and maybe a little scared for Elevate here. I think they have a decent draft, and I think this duo lane is going to, feel the ire of an Achilles, but for the most part, I think they're going to be just as fine, if not even more fine, because their clear should be in their favor in just a level or two. But it does feel like Gonzo Tahiti, especially getting Mollusk on something he was just comfortable on, Sops. Granted, late game Kronos and early game Kronos feel incredibly different. He was comfortable on this pick pretty much the entirety of last game. I feel like the small tweaks Gonzo Tahiti have changed, have just accelerated their early game to get them a lead even faster.
Potentially, and now if you're Elevate, you've kind of picked some low pressure in the jungle. You've picked a very low pressure solo laner in Xing Chen. Elevate seem to be of the opinion that no matter how far ahead Gonzo Tahiti get, they'll be able to potentially win a team fight come late game and be able to take it. And I think that is a reasonable conclusion after the way Game 2 played out. I mean, you don't get much more of a lead than what Gonzo Tahiti had, and they still were on the brink of losing that game. But I'm just of the opinion that going the other way would have been a little bit better. Get themselves some pressure so they can actually contest and not have this happen to them.
Yeah, unfortunately for Monster Bomber, I think he feels the pressure that Gone to Tahiti are bringing. Mollusk decides to show up, and, well, that's pretty much the end of it. You can see the rest, or if you didn't, well, he got murdered fast. And that's about the only way to describe it. But the thing I think is interesting, I actually really like this. You know, you had highlighted, like, you could technically swing a Materasu support. You could swing this Achilles over there, which is what we ended up seeing. I was really hoping, somewhere in my heart of hearts, that this was going to be a Ratatoskr support, which I think I've seen only one person try, and I believe it was Raffer. Didn't really work out for SSG that game, but I've tried it. I think it's fun. It might not necessarily be the most competitive thing in the world, but, you know, sometimes you just got to have that fun. But unfortunately, for me, and for anybody else hoping to see something like that, Mollusk is just going to go and get some insane stuns again, make some awesome plays, and, you know, all that exciting things.
Right.
Where's the fun in it?
Yeah, do the good Ratatoskr stuff, you know, snowball early game, find big
actually
dumps
help
late
his team
game.
win.
Right, like try and win and do the right thing, but I mean, come on, you know, when we're talking some cool support picks, I agree. Ratatoskr could be there. Unfortunate that it wasn't the case for us here.
Well, it's always just been interesting to me, especially because the Acorn conversation, I think, was very prominent with the changes that Ratatoskr had a little bit ago. And realistically, you know, people were thinking, man, Crit Acorn feels insane. We thought that going into Phase 2, that Crit Acorn, it just felt so good. But here you see Mollusk going for easier stuns, and I expect we're going to see it come into play right here. No, he completely whiffs the ability, and now Bluegin's rotated on over. Cope going to be in an awkward position. The knock-up from Spreen not going to be able to connect, though. The damage is going to be good. They're going to get the trade, though. It's a little awkward. And Mando gets a solo kill over there on the island. So it works out better for Gone to Tahiti. They lose their support of all things, and they're happy with that.
Spreen probably thought, no way he dashes in here, dunks down. Well, you don't know Mollusk then. He's going to find the big play if he can. Almost found another one onto Renjaru, if not for some good peel by Monster Bomber. No Scarab's Blessing, of course, kept only level 3 or 4 when that fight was happening. So that means Spreen dies without getting a chance to use that crushing wave, and now he down a full level to Mando Warrior on this right-hand side. Now it's, again, the side lanes for Elevate really, really struggling, and that's going to make sure, really, that they can't put pressure on the Sops to try and knock him down early.
Well, down a level, but not down in kills anymore, although the credit goes over to Spreen, not there to Heed, so it at least helps them out on that right side of the map, and the buff's going to still be picked up in their favor. Kind of surprised to not see them maybe get aggressive, knowing that they could potentially try to strip away something from Gone to Tahiti, because we just saw Gone to Tahiti show pretty much no abandon when they decided to just jump in and strip anything they could find in the jungle from Elevate a second ago. And as such, and Aggro, I feel like I must have missed something, because it's only been 5 total kills, but it's about a 1,500 gold lead for Gone to Tahiti already.
I mean, first blood, and then another couple kills over there on that left-hand side, the solo kill for Mando, where then he's able to go and invade backs. It's definitely been coming up chaos so far for Gone to Tahiti, but now everyone on Elevate is hit level 5. I wonder if this Khepri ultimate's going to change things for them, for Elevate here.
We'll have to see if he's even in a good position to try and use it. Cope trying to find some lockdown, but there's Bluegin once again. That global ultimate making sure it's finding its worth. Diesel taken down, and now even in kills are Elevate. That's that rotation potential right now Bluegin has that pretty much no one in the game is going to be able to keep up with. An ever-present threat. And the secondary Hunter seems to be helping out Renjaru and Monster Bomber a lot, having him rotate over here.
Early 2-0 for Bluegin, and perfect timing on the ultimate use both times. Right there it was as soon as Diesel used his dash, and then his ultimate. We know we're pretty free. We're home free on that kill, and Andy gets the beads out from Diesel at the same time. And this is before Bluegin has finished off that Transcendence, which is going to give him some CDR to really use that ultimate as consistently as possible. So I like the way that he's been playing it thus far. He's really been the one, I think, keeping Elevate in it.
Well, Mollusk As the ultimate I want to keep my eyes on. Last time around, he was the one that was setting up a lot of these early game kills. Unfortunately for Mollusk, doesn't seem like he's going to be able to get out of here. He can't channel the ult. They're going to be running around. Actually, good pathing to make sure Renjaru can't find it, and that's a good blink. Channels the ult up into the sky, and that was close, but not as close as Elevate would have liked. He manages to get on out of there, and they didn't really burn anything trying to get to him except time, which honestly is helpful for Elevate as well.
Elevate probably pretty happy with how that went, though overall probably a little bit upset that they didn't end up actually getting the kill on the Mollusk. Probably should have been one, but Renjaru a little bit off the mark with that leap in, and then couldn't find the crucial auto attack after the fact.
Well, now it's the question of what Gone to Tahiti want to do next, right? It's been very awkward feeling, I guess is the only way to describe it. Like they feel like they're confident in getting aggressive. Blugan has been able to thwart them every time they jump in just because of his ult, and now that's available for them. I expect to see him still making that impact, although he's starting to fall behind. The rotation, the 2 kills, they've been nice, but the farm is still going Sop's way, and right now doesn't really mean a whole lot. I don't think we're going to see anything out of Sop. So again, last game we saw one highlight at 6 minutes, and then 24 minutes later is when we finally started seeing any others. So I still don't expect to see him come online even for another maybe 12 minutes where he's going to have a big play. But as of right now, just having that small lead, it's pretty big for the mid laner.
Agreed. That is that's a pretty big deal, just to know that he won't get bullied out at the very least in this part of the game. Though the reason that Blugan's a little bit behind is because even though he's getting kills on these ults over, you miss a full wave, you're going to be behind a little bit in terms of golden XP. But I think that Elevate very okay with the way that mid lane is playing out so far. And the more I think about it, the more I like this Turnabog pick for Blugan, because the Chronos 3, the stop time, really, really good in terms of stun, damage potential, setup. It's going to guarantee your one. But if you're Turnabog, you actually have those true immunity frames when you're in the wall. You can actually dash in, cleanse that, because you won't get hit by the second half of the stop time. You won't get hit by the damage, and you won't stun you, of course, because you're in the wall. So then you can just pop out and go to work right away and try and get some return damage off. So I like the counter matchup there, whereas most of the time once Chronos hits you with that 3, you know you're going to take the damage on the back end pretty much no matter what.
Good for Blugan being able to read into that, although so far, maybe not. Well, we haven't actually been able to see it. Maybe he's done it quite a few times, but so far, haven't gotten to see too much of him interacting with Chronos. And maybe it's just because Sopsa knows that he's not going to be able to find anything in that. He hasn't been getting aggressive, and things have slowed down for the most part. Mollusk's not going to be looking for anything here. I think that last sense of aggression for him maybe kind of thwarted his mindset in terms of jumping deep, although the ward coverage has gone to Tahiti. Showcase right there. Still pretty deep, pretty extensive in terms of trying to find any sort of timers they can, any invasions they can in the jungle. Still hasn't really amounted to a whole lot, although that gold lead ever expanding in their favor. It's been very passively growing, as now it's sitting at 2,200. It's much, much larger. I mean, 700 gold kind of seemingly out of nowhere, even though they kind of lost the team fights since then.
The gold lead is about the same place as where it was in game number 2, but the experience difference is much, much better for Elevate. I mean, it's still an experience lead for Gone to Tahiti, as you would expect. I mean, especially in the solo lane where it's Warrior versus Guardian, you'd expect that to go Gone to Tahiti's way pretty easily, and it has, but the experience being as close as it is means that Elevate is actually able to stand and fight if necessary, and as opposed to game number 2 where they couldn't do a whole lot of anything.
Gone to Tahiti won a Gold Fury. They started it up, dropped it about half, and now they've de-warded what Elevate just threw down to keep vision on there. So they're definitely sniffing it out here 11 minutes into the game. But the question is whether or not they can find it. Cope right now going to get locked down. Good knock-up from Spreen. They're not going to be able to find any follow-up from it, but I think it showcases how squishy Cope is right now. Not very tanky is an Achilles just in general, but you know, with just Sledge to his name, he's not going to be able to do much. Now Mollusk comes jumping and is going to be able to find some good lockdown there onto Renjaru, forces the ult and the res from Monster Bomber onto himself. The dual lane for Elevate taken down like it's nothing, And now they don't even have to sniff out that Gold Fury. They can just start it up if they want to.
They've earned that right, for sure. Another good dunk from Mollusk. This Ratatosk here continues to be problematic for Elevate.
Heat goes in, Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, just off the mark. Didn't grab anyone, now he's by himself. But a couple of leaps get him right into the waiting hands of Spreen and Blugan, both of which still have their ultimate coming into this, which is maybe enough to thwart Gone to Tahiti as a whole. Renjaru now back, maybe able to make a big play, and kind of surprised to see it. Gone to Tahiti not able to do much with the aggression they found. In fact, now getting turned on. Mollusk in the jungle trying to run away, and it looks like he's going to be just one hit too short. He jumps in, he
Nice
gets
time.
stunned, and it looks like Mollusk, with no mana left to his name, is going to save his own life at the cost of Cope. But it's the oldest play in the book. Hey guys, they're all over here on right lane. What can we do? Let's take that Gold Fury.
And it's a pretty easy one for Gone to Tahiti as well. Spreen couldn't get there in time to use that ultimate, but Elevate not going to come up completely empty-handed here. They get the Pyromancer at the very least. Gone to Tahiti is doing a very good job in this early game, man. They really got it down pat on how to get ahead in these moments. But I think that Elevate's composition this time around is a little bit better at snowballing a small advantage because of the double hunter, that if we see game 2 kind of repeat where Tahiti ends up throwing a fight or two and Elevate have an opportunity to get some stuff done, I think Elevate is in a much better position to capitalize on that this time around.
That's maybe the biggest thing they were missing in Game 2. No opportunities to really fight back. And even in late game when they found them, I think the biggest one came from that Phoenix defense we saw first, maybe opening up the door. Mollusk jumps in and eats more than his health bar this time around. Spreen going to be able to get that last kill. Has to use his blink in order to get it, but he's more than happy to do that. A lot of focus from Gone to Tahiti over here on not only the red buff, but these back camps more than anything. Mollusk has spent a lot of time over here. He's now lost his life over here as he gets too aggressive that time. Tier 1 tower looking to go down here for Elevate, but it's just barely still alive. Finally, Sops is going to hit that final smack, but it costs Mando his life as it gets thrown back by Heed. The setup is there, but a lot of the ults that was used for it no longer available here for Elevate to maybe continue setting up any plays, and Heed maybe just biting off way more than he needs to. Cope gonna be able to get the execute like it's nothing, pulled back into it, but still has that ult to dash away. Takes a lot of damage from Renjaru, but it's not gonna matter to him. So they're just gonna burn him down. That tier 1 tower did get taken down, but I don't think they care too much. This Cope honestly might be looking to go back in, but I think he's just gonna lose his life.
Pretty easily to Blugan on top of that, and it was a good setup and nearly kill onto Renjaru, but Diesel doesn't pull the trigger on that mounted archery. Think that could have been a kill for him if he would have just insta-popped that. No Aegis for Renjaru, and so that was certainly an opportunity there for Gone to Tahiti, but both teams kind of punished for overextending a little bit. First it was Heed, then Cope baby, so it's all even at the end of the day, I suppose, if both frontliners are going to have the same mistake.
Well, now it's up to Spreen to try and make the difference here. No mana, no life for the jungler there. Fortunately for Elevate, they're not going to be able to return anything they wanted to. Renjaru forced out early as well. So they're just going to have to sit back on their laurels here and know that Gone to Tahiti, I mean, it's still just a small lead, but it's ever growing. Every time I look up the gold, it's just more positive in their favor. Now they're playing around, what, 2 minutes for a Fury. It might be Blugan who's in trouble as they come dashing down. A great moves from him, though. Get him out of danger. And at least stop Gone to Tahiti from getting any of the kills they're looking for, although it might have just been delayed.
Not if Monster Bomber has anything to say about it. A beautiful Scarab's Blessing for him, and Heed around the backside, gonna grab a whole lot of nothing. Greedy to try and grab Sops and not Mando Warrior. Mando didn't have any CC immunity left. I don't know if they would have had the damage to kill him, but I know Sops is never getting pulled by that with that rewind up.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how Elevate have been retaliating. The first game, it felt like they were choosing their targets pretty easily and they knew where to focus it down, although there was, as we had noted, a lot of focus on the Cope from them then. I think this game that could still pay off because it's pretty squishy, but back on the Ganesh, it was a little more head-scratchy than anything else. Now, it feels weird because there's some targets they could lock down, although tossing an Amaterasu into your team does feel kind of like it might be a bad decision, so I guess I'm okay with it for Heed. They're not getting anything out of this, which is starting to become bothersome, I think, more than anything. Elevate, as of right now, just can't do anything to try and chip at this gold deficit they're in. And it's not even really through towers. I mean, God Tahiti took a tier 1. If they can get this Oni Fury on the side of Elevate, that might help them, but otherwise it's just been all on these buff invades, all of these little experience camps that Mollusk has gone through and stripped away. It's a perfect showcase of how those little things really do add up over time.
And it's crazy to think that this lead is so big despite it not really reflecting in the experience. I mean, 3 out of 5 rolls are even for Elevate in experience, but still pretty far behind in gold, and it has translated into some itemization advantages for Gauntlet Tahiti, especially in ADC.
Well, Oni Fury taken down by Gauntlet Tahiti like it's nothing. Mollusk comes crashing into the backline. Ranjaru forced to jump out, trying to stay alive. Spreen as well, falling back with the rest of the team. I was maybe expecting a little bit more out of what Gauntlet Tahiti were trying to do here, but I think the zone is going to be enough for him, but it's not enough for Elevate. They want to go back in here. Blugan came crashing in with his ult. Heed is in the area, has that Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, but Mando Warrior is the one who finds a kill. He's one tick away from dead, but no one's going to be able to lock down the solo laner. Diesel hops on his mount, gets on out of there. Now, that looks like a good, clean disengage. It's a 1 for none so far. With Monster Bomber not finding the lockup here for Cope or for Sops, I think they're going to get away with murder.
Shoutouts to Thorns, baby. Why you hitting yourself, Ranjaru? I think that's what dealt the killing blow to him right there, because Bando was wrapped up by Monster Bomber, but he just never got a chance to get that ultimate off, and that's pretty awkward. I mean, he's got 30% CDR. You really want to be using that as often as you can, and it just never comes to fruition for him. I thought that Blugan's ultimate was going to set Heat up for a massive blink, but just was never able to find his way in and pick a priority target for it.
Gauntlet Tahiti get the Pyromancer, pretty much like it's nothing. Stunned just off the mark once again by Mollusk. That's been a few this game that have caused some trouble for Gauntlet Tahiti, and now maybe just prolonging the inevitable for Heed. That stun maybe could have helped it come through faster, but it doesn't matter. Still gets the kill and the tower over here on the right side of the map. Mollusk is going up into the air, looking for the knockup. Who he wants to go in on is going to be the question. Ranjaru is going to be in an unfortunate spot, burned down almost before anything can happen. There's going to be the res from Khepri, trying to get him out of dodge fast, but it's not going to stop Mando Warrior running into the back line and picking up the kill. They lose Cope in the process, so it's a 2 for 1 total, but you only lose your support if you're gone to Tahiti. Blugan forced to ult in an awkward scenario. It's going to be a great turnaround. Gauntlet Tahiti looked like they want to go back in. In fact, Sops in an awkward spot takes a lot of damage on this Kronos. But he's going to stay alive. Mollusk over there in mid looking to push a tower. They're just going for pressure now if you're GTT.
But you've earned a lot of it already, man. I mean, they are up a massive amount of gold once again. 8,000 just 20 minutes in, despite it being 10 to 8. It's really just Elevate is kind of discombobulated, it feels like, on these re-engages. Spreen has not been able to match his presence on the Raven nearly as well with either the Nemesis or this Hebo. Now he's down 3 levels. All of a sudden, Mando jumps out to a 2-level advantage. And all of a sudden, that experience that I was saying, at least that isn't too bad for Elevate. Now it's kind of bad.
Well, we'll have to figure out if they can bounce back. Last time it was a good Phoenix defense that kind of started it, and then maybe some misplays from Gauntlet Tahiti that kept them in it, but Elevate still ultimately end up losing that one. Now they lose the Fire Giant, almost like it's nothing there. Nobody from Elevate even able to get close to it. Still 3 towers standing, so some decent amounts of gold on the map for Gauntlet Tahiti to kind of swing even more in their favor. It's almost disgusting considering they're up about 10,000 gold now. It's just going to get even further ahead here. So the re-engages, the things that have been sloppy from Elevate, this is the time to switch them around. Otherwise, you're just going to lose it all. And now you're in a 4v5. Try to find what you can. Lockdown onto Sops in the backline is going to be the call for Heed. He's going to be able to pluck Diesel, but it's just Diesel and no follow-up from the rest of the crew. Trying to get aggressive. Cope and Mando leading the way. Mollusk rotating on in as well. Not looking for the stuns, looking for the objective and finding that gold in their favor. Elevate, fall back to that Phoenix. They're going to keep themselves alive, but it's at a large cost. 2 towers down in the blink of an eye.
And again, another poor follow-up off of he. This time it actually was the ultimate for him, but no beads for Diesel. Had Aegis, but you don't want to let him hit the ground. Why isn't Spreen just slamming forward in that spot? Monster Bomber has that Scarab's Blessing. I mean, I know Cope has the Execute on the other side, but if you trade Spreen for Diesel in a Phoenix Siege situation when Spreen is level 15, 16, that is absolutely worth your time and going 1-for-1 in that moment. So I think that just a bit of a miscommunication. And so far, I really feel like this Hebo jungle has not been as impactful as it has needed to be if Elevate want to come back in this one.
It's all about the Phoenix defense. That's at this point, it's almost all I'm waiting for. You've got 2 minutes, just a little over there, on the Fire Giant buff. And that's kind of where things were thwarted last time, although I believe they were able to get a couple of kills, caused some awkward moments for Gaunt Tahiti throughout the duration. Now it's just what can you do to stall them, slow them, stop them, any of the above. Primal Fury taken down there by Gaunt Tahiti. That's 3 this game they've gotten, most of which uncontested. And a familiar grouping I'm used to seeing. Mollusk with his ult way over there on the right-hand side of the map. The other 4 looking to pressure out left. Heed, Monster Bomber. They're in a position, but I don't know if they have a lot they can do.
Spreen trying to take the 1v1 up against Mollusk 4 levels down in mid. That's going to be pretty easy for Mollusk, but does leave Elevating a 4-on-4 over here. Now a 5-on-4 is Mollusk going to join the fray.
Mollusk drops down, not going to go for the knock-up. Instead, the Phoenix is what goes down. Mando going to get eviscerated in the process, though. Taken down before you can see anything else happen. But that's Cope being able to find himself a kill, find himself 2 kills. Last dash gets him on out of dodge. The Titan at the ready. And there's only 3 members left of Elevate to try and defend this one. Mid-Phoenix in trouble as they put the aggression onto that. Rinjaru, once again in the blink of an eye, taken down. Diesel, a lot of damage in return. Blugan looking for that last hit, but he's getting too much dealt to him in response. A good stun from Mollusk, just a hair too late, though, as the Fountain going to start doing its work and healing him up. The damage is going to be good from Spreen. Blugan looking to try and defend this, but with Spreen gone, that's all it's going to be. Gaunt Tahiti just run it in at the end and take the set 2-1.
And that's kind of the way I was expecting the set to go in game number 1, where Gaunt Tahiti pick pressure and just really, really get out to these fantastic early game advantages. It's kind of what Cope and Mollusk teams love to do. Weren't able to do it in game 1 of this set. Games 2 and 3, a lot more their style, and what do you know, those are the ones they win.
Well, I was curious, I think more and more so, as we saw. Blugan, I think, had a great game, 5-0-3, hard to argue against that one. Sobs didn't necessarily get to the same state we saw last time, about, 17,000 damage less, but they didn't have to play as long last time, so this Chronos was really just good for setup and what it could do on the side. It was instead, I think, Mando picking up this Amaterasu, Mollusk once again on that Ratatoskr. A lot of that carried in its setup potential, and it just made it so much more difficult for Elevate to do anything.
Agreed. I thought that Mollusk was just way more impactful than Spreen was in this game. Mando the same over Heed. And for me, Gore, the biggest change, or I think where it went wrong almost for Elevate, was the Sobek ban in that first pick slot. You compare what Monster Bomber was able to do on the Sobek in comparison to the Khepri these last 2 games. I know that the Achilles was picked against it these last 2 games, but at least in game 3 they had the opportunity to ban it in the second phase, chose not to, allowed the Gaunt Tahiti to go back to that execute. Feel like that if they had that Sobek pressure, it might have gone a little bit differently.
Well, Elevate giving them trouble makes things a little bit shaky. Later tonight, Gaunt Tahiti going to have to go up against Locked and Goated, who are in a doubleheader themselves there, as they're going to be playing a couple of teams. So interesting to see how it'll shake out. But Gaunt Tahiti right now still solidly in 3rd. Locked and Goated looking to try and give them a run for their money. As Baskin and the boys continue to dominate up and the top of the SCC right now, Aggro. It's not too surprising, very similar to what we see in Europe. One team that has been getting first all year still remains first, and it seems like the race for everybody else is being the first to take them down here in North America. It's just a huge question. Who can catch up to Baskin and the boys?
Feel like Locked and Goated is a team that we got to be looking at. I mean, they're the ones that came away on top in the playoffs last time, so you know that they've got that potential. A lot of veterans on that squad. Looking forward to seeing their matchup soon.
Well, as of right now, guys, that does it for the SCC, but there's still more Smite on the way. You look at the clock, it says 2:58 p.m. At least here, it says 2:58 p.m., which means we're only a few minutes away from the Smite Pro League. So, once again, go grab your drinks, your snacks, get yourself settled, much like we are, because we'll be right back with the SBL.